Kenmore City Council is now in session. Will the clerk please take the roll?
Councilmember Marshall,
Present.
Mayor Baker,
Here.
Deputy Mayor Herbig,
Here.
Councilmember File,
Present.
Councilmember Kugler,
Here.
Councilmember O'Kane,
Here.
Councilmember Shrubnik,
Here.
all present.
So I'd like to acknowledge that we're on the traditional land of the first people of Kenmore and honor with gratitude the land itself and the Coast Salish peoples who thrive in this place alive and strong. Will you please now join me in the flag salute? I pledge allegiance to the flag, the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So, next item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. And if there is no changes, the agenda will stand approved as written. Did I hear something? So the agenda stands approved as written. So I'd like to read a proclamation, Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And whereas domestic violence is widespread and has a devastating impact on survivors, children, families, and our community. And whereas domestic violence crosses all economic, racial, gender, educational, religious, and social barriers, and is sustained by indifference. And whereas approximately 1 in 8 Washington adults reported experiencing domestic violence in their lifetime. And whereas intimate partner violence remains one of the most prevalent yet underreported crimes in the country. And whereas ending the cycle of this vicious crime requires the courage of survivors and the support of the larger community. And whereas ending the cycle of this vicious crime requires the courage of survivors and the support of the larger community. And whereas our efforts must extend beyond the criminal justice system to include housing, economic advocacy for survivors, working with young people to stop violence before it starts, and reaching out to friends and loved ones who have suffered from domestic violence. And whereas I, David Baker, Mayor of the City of Kenmore, on behalf of the City Council, do hereby proclaim October 2021 as Domestic Violence Awareness Month in the City of Kenmore. In solidarity, we encourage residents to display purple lights to bring domestic violence awareness. Now, therefore, let us honor the survivors by promoting peace in our own families, homes, and communities. And let us renew our commitment to end domestic violence and its brutal and destructive effects so that domestic violence has no future in Kenmore or beyond. Madam Clerk, is there anybody here to accept the proclamation tonight?
No, Mayor Baker.
Okay, thank you very much. Next item on the agenda is an introduction and welcome to Dr. Devin Byrd, Bastyr president, our new president. Welcome, sir. It was such a pleasure meeting you a week or so ago, and I am really looking forward to working with you during your presidency. Bastyr, with you at the helm, has got a very bright future. Mr. Carlinsey? I guess not. Dr. Byrd, would you like to say a few words, sir?
Absolutely. Mayor, I want to thank you as well as the city manager and the assistant city manager for extending a warm hand as well as welcome to Bastyr. We also are very excited about our continued relationship as well as opportunities to enhance that relationship with the city of Kenmore. Everything is really exciting at this particular point, especially with the new initiatives. And we are poised, we believe, to strike up some new opportunities between our organizations and look forward to doing so, not only in the coming months, but also the coming years. So I was glad to have had an opportunity to meet with you as well as the others. And also, we really do look forward to forging an even tighter relationship.
Wonderful. Thank you. Mr. City Manager, this is Assistant City Manager. Do you have comments you want to add?
I'll begin because I'm in a time zone a couple hours ahead of you tonight. Bastyr, as you know, is Kenmore's largest employer and just a tremendous asset to this community. And as Dr. Byrd said, we had a great introductory meeting a couple of weeks ago, and it just is very exciting to think of all the opportunities that we have to build on the already strong relationship we have as a city with the university. And I just am very, very happy to have the opportunity to work with you, President Byrd.
Thank you very much for that.
Yeah, I'll just echo everything that's been said. Dr. Byrd did a great job outlining his priorities and vision. I can tell he's going to be a great leader for Bastyr. And we covered a lot in our meeting, including ball fields and master plan and a bunch of other things. So stay tuned on all that.
Thank you, Dr. Byrd. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the invitation. I really appreciate it. I'd also like to thank Councilmember Kugler for the introductions and her continued connection with myself as well. Thank you.
Great. You and your staff, don't be a stranger to us. All right. Next item on our agenda is our own and really, really amazing King County Council member, Rod Dembowski.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilors, you should see the bills I get for these introductions. Baker. A little embarrassing. Hey, it's great to be with all of you and seeing a lot of friendly faces and folks who are just wonderful to work with, and both at the elected level and your administration level. I appreciate the opportunity to join you. I have a fairly regular meeting with Mayor Baker and your city manager, Mr. Kerlinzy, and in one of those recently, he suggested it would be good to check in, and so that generated tonight's meeting. Your assistant city manager, Nancy Owsley, and I just participated in a hiring panel for the new North Shore Senior Center executive director to replace Brooke Knight, so we got to do a little work together. I thought tonight I might share with you just a few slides of county update on some of the things we've been doing with respect to the pandemic response, the investment of federal funds that we've received, talk a little bit about our homelessness response deployment of dollars in particular, address our health through housing initiative, highlight some of our Kenmore investments and issues, and then maybe dialogue with you on issues that I didn't cover or that you're interested in. My awesome staffer, Elizabeth Evans Webb, my long suffering 8 years staffer, has done helped me out with some slides, and we'll see if she can put them up. I also want to thank your clerk, who's been wonderful to help get us here and make sure that it worked technologically. So thanks, Elizabeth. And I saw many of you at the 75th anniversary for Kenmore Air, and even got Mayor Baker to climb up on that pontoon of that de Havilland Beaver and take a picture. And he's getting skinnier and I'm getting fatter is what my takeaway on that picture is. But I thought it was a great community event, and the pride that you could feel and see there was just really neat. And I thought it was really exemplary and of Kenmore and the great things that are going on in your city. So fun event, neat to be included, and really a point of pride for the city. So let's jump into it, Elizabeth. I thought I would talk a little bit about where we stand from a public health perspective with respect to vaccine deployments. We continue to lead, if not lead at the top, very close to the top of the nation here in King County. We're the 12th largest county in the country with a little over 2.25 million people. And as of today, we've got 1.67 million King County residents, or almost 86%, 16 and older, having received at least one dose, and about 1.56 million residents fully vaccinated. In North King County, including Kenmore, you can see the number is 90% of eligible residents have received at least one dose. So the numbers are really off the charts. And we started early in the spring. This is with Shoreline Fire. Of course, they partnered with North Shore Fire in Bothell to do a mobile vaccination approach. Here we were out visiting folks in adult group homes, getting them some of their early vaccines. And I think you'll remember back to that time, everybody wanted it. It was a scramble to get it. And our public servants, I think, have really stepped up in public health and in our fire departments and in the cooperating, governments and agencies. And it's a pretty amazing success story. Not perfect, but pretty darn good. And I'm proud of our government and how we've responded, and our residents who, it takes a willingness and a commitment to partner on this with respect to our responses, from mask wearing, social distancing, capacity limits at restaurants. And it hasn't been easy, and people sometimes get frustrated, and that's understandable. But we've got a good track record here, and it's because the public worked together with the public health authorities and the experts at the University of Washington, and I think we've done it mostly right. There'll be lessons to learn, but I'm really proud of how we've come together on this. All right, Elizabeth. As you all know, because Kenmore finally received some money as well from the feds, we received significant federal help to respond to the pandemic and the economic crisis. At the county, we adopted a motion as this money began to come to really give big picture priorities. And they were these first, and most of them aren't ranked, but the first one was a public health response. That means the isolation and quarantine centers, the de-intensification facilities from the congregate shelter facilities, standing up, the public health response, the testing, the vaccination, the masks, the PPE, all of the items that public health has done, the education campaigns. That was job one. Second, food security and access, and hand in hand with that has been housing stability and responding to help those who are homeless. Then economic recovery, investing in helping get people back on their feet economically. And then kind of our behavioral health function and safety and security, including the courts. Those are kind of been the areas that we adopted. And within those, we spent a fair bit of money, or our spending. It's a total, believe it or not, of in the last year and a half or so of $1.4 billion. I mean, it is, and people say spending money is easy. Spending that kind of money in that short amount of time and trying to do it effectively is really hard. I mean, it's hard. And I'm sure that when we look back and the audits are done, there'll be some stumbles here or there, or some things that could have been done better. But for the most part, because of our kind of principled approach to where we thought we should make investments, I'm optimistic that the story on the whole will be a good one. Included in that is quite a bit of, I don't know if we call it out, I don't think we do, but of transit dollars. Here's some examples. And I know this is small fonts, but just to give you an idea, in the public health space, $200 million for isolation, quarantine recovery centers, shelter de-intensification, $100 million in the vaccine space, $30 million of PPE, food security. You can see there kind of some of the work that we did, including working closely with a lot of community organizations to distribute culturally appropriate foods. We've tried to really be aware and meet people where they are and listen to folks in terms of constituents who need the help. What do they need as a driving principle? I've taken a fair bit of personal role in the economic recovery space, getting money out to our cities on a per capita basis. I know we got some to Kenmore to use as you saw fit, to our small business organizations like the Chamber, Bothell Kenmore Chamber of Commerce, and also kind of our Visitors Bureau, both the Seattle King County Convention Visitors Bureau, but also, up in, Woodinville for some of the local tourism as well. And, that's starting to come back. There's a lot of jobs there in terms of service and construction, but those are good jobs and will be important to the region. In the behavioral health space, I'm extra worried about the consequences of isolation on our young people and our seniors, and have worked to add in our budget fairly significant dollars to be responsive there. We defer a lot to the executive branch on how to spend that money. They're our experts, right, Councilmember Shrubnik? They know what needs to be done. We're kind of, as policymakers and budget writers at the big picture, but you all are seeing, I know a lot of you have expertise and interested in this area, that the overdose deaths are skyrocketing, suicide deaths of young people skyrocketing. There's a lot of really, really sad and tough impacts from the pandemic, and a lot of it, the isolation. So we put some money into getting help for particularly vulnerable populations. In that case, I mean, youth and seniors who have, I think, suffered a disproportionate amount of consequences from that. And hopefully that will do some good. Our last budget, we put a fair bit of money into our criminal justice or criminal legal system. Our courts, obviously it's hard to seat a jury in person and conduct a lot of their business with the rules that have been in place. They pivoted pretty good and are doing voir dire, jury selection, and even some trials over Zoom with some success, but there's been a significant delay. And at the same time, there's been a fairly significant spike in some serious crime that needs to be addressed in that system. The district courts have been able to do less work. They really have not been as active over Zoom as the Superior Court. So we sent them some dollars. Our funding was fairly equal across the defense and prosecution side. And we also made fairly significant investments in alternatives to the traditional criminal legal system to try and take a more holistic approach. So there's just some highlights. But let me drill down a little bit on the housing stability and homeless services. You've seen, well, just top line, we've got about $350 million that we've allocated in this space. And I will tell you from a council member, this side of it, there's the appropriating and then there's the actual deployment of the money on the administration side. We acted very quickly on the legislative side once to get these dollars deployed. We moved these 8 budgets very fast, particularly given their size and complexity, because an overarching goal was to get the help out. I will say in candor, and I think you've seen reporting on this, based on a number of things, including not having the infrastructure in the government to deal with this kind of money, working in a new space, and then the requirements of the federal money with respect to accountability and contracting. Nobody is happy with the pace with which we've got this money deployed into the hands of residents and landlords. So I will say that this has the attention of our housing folks. They're working very hard and developing and deploying some new strategies to speed this up. And I think to date, as of today, we've got now $78 million in rent assistance out of the 350, and that pace is increasing. We're doing some new strategies to be able to deploy the money, including self-attestation regarding income. In other words, reducing the paperwork demands on the applicants who need the help, and also doing some advanced payments to get dollars out. And so I'm hopeful that we'll see some improvement here. I know that they're working very hard to make that happen. And I want to acknowledge and appreciate the city of Kenmore. I know that you put a significant contribution into the North Shore Schools Foundation, I believe it was, to help folks that need to stay housed. And that kind of approach of working with a local partner that's connected to folks directly, I think is an awesome one. So thank you for your leadership on that. Turning a little bit more broadly away from the pandemic, but to our homelessness crisis, which the pandemic exacerbated. I think the numbers, and they vary, but on any one night, there's about 12,000 individuals who are lacking stable housing in King County, 6,000 or so of those. And that number varies a little bit, but are truly unsheltered, no shelter space at all. The pandemic has made it harder because it pinched our congregate response of shelters. We really aren't using those. And we haven't been able to open up as much replacement space. So that's a short-term or maybe kind of short-term additional problem to the fundamental one, which is we don't have enough space for folks to live in a very expensive housing market. The county, I'm very impressed with this health through housing program. We adopted a 1/10 of a penny sales tax. We got the authority from the legislature to do it councilmanically. Previously, it had required a vote of the people. So we did it councilmanically. A few cities, as you all know, opted out. North King counties did not. In other words, they opted to keep the money locally. Even with the opt-outs, we're looking at $50 million a year or so in 2021. That's we're going to bond some. We are bonding some of that money. And the goal is to basically bring in 1,600 folks who are homeless today by acquiring already built facilities, mostly hotels. We have just this month announced the purchase of the 8th hotel. Our goal is 10. And I will tell you, in my 8 years now on the council, this program is maybe giving me the most hope because I'm seeing action and units acquired and services delivered with it. And it shows to me that it is possible to do this. We need, according to the Third Door Coalition, about 6,500 new units. This is fully a quarter of them. So to me, I see within 1 year, one program acquiring a quarter of the total needs identified, built and ready to go as a sign that it absolutely can be done. And Councilmember O'Kane served along with Elizabeth on my staff of the North County Enhanced Shelter Task Force. Just as that was getting going, the Lake City partners, who I know the city had worked with in partnership with churches, opened this Oaks facility over in Shoreline. That's what the picture is. It was a retirement, or it was a kind of a senior care facility, not a hotel, but this is the model, and pretty exciting. And I want to thank Kenmore. All of you and your administration has offered to say, hey, if there was a site in Kenmore, we'll work with you. And just unfortunately, you don't have big enough older hotels. So, but the spirit has been there, and you've been a wonderful partner on all issues, housing and homelessness. Mary's Place perhaps being the most known example of how you did the administrative changes to your zoning code to make that happen. And Deputy Mayor Herbig, of course, was an important leader in working on that. So anyway, I'm very optimistic on this health through housing, and I'd like to find a way, as I say, to quadruple it. I wish we didn't have to do just sales tax, though, of course, so aggressive. All right, so I think that's a positive note. A couple highlights on some Kenmore investments. I know that the city continues to work with folks regarding a Lake Point and just general connectivity over the water. Mayor Baker and your city manager and assistant city manager have been big champions, and Councilmember File, you've really also been a strong leader in particularly the electrification of this mode of transit, and that is water taxi service. We run routes today from West Seattle and Vashon Island to downtown Seattle. There's been a fair bit of work in this space at the Puget Sound Regional Council, and we have our own planning as well. And the Kenmore to Seattle route, either at UW or Madison Park, scored very well in the assessment of about 50 routes. And so in the last budget, I put an expenditure restriction in of $500,000 to advance the work for on-water and shoreside planning. So the theory being, let's do the work of what it would take on the shores with respect to docks and parking and transit connections and all of that. Also the boats, what kind of boats, what the capacity we would need, what are the routes. So we have, as much as we can, a plan ready to go when we have the funding to do it. And I think the funding could come in a couple of ways. I know in some of the federal infrastructure packages, there's money for ferries, including green ferries, zero emission ferries. And I think, there's an opportunity to expand our own King County dollars allocated to that. This is now in the transit division. Transit will always, maybe not always, but I think for a long time be needing money, but this is actually a fairly healthy fund right now. And so I'm very optimistic, and I see a growing consensus around the region among our constituents and leaders that this is something that we should continue to advance. We have some money. I put in $500,000 for TOD, affordable housing projects related to park and rides. Short Line's looking at one, you all are looking at one, and we're in ongoing discussions about the work you want to do to bring affordable housing. I know it's the council's -- goal, right next to climate change. Now, you had to rank them, but they're tied essentially. That's what I was told. So, when our city partners say we want to be a regional partner in bringing on affordable housing, we're excited to, of course, do that with you. And I've been working to make sure we get you the support to do the planning and site identification, and then hopefully the capital money to bring it online. And we've had a meeting here just in the last couple of weeks with Rob Carlinzi and your federal COVID person. I apologize, I'm forgetting her name right now, but we connected them with our housing folks. And I think it was a good meeting on what funds are available for that pipeline. Of course, you know about the nearly $800,000 for the Radar Navigator program that our North End police departments are standing up to bring social workers and behavioral health experts alongside our frontline police officers to get folks the help they need. I will say that has been, we were ahead of the game on that. It's helping lead the way, and in terms of reforms to responses in public safety, and I think it's good. The picture here, I was just up a couple of weeks ago. I guess it was the same day as the Kenmore Air celebration. You guys have really led the way with your walkways and waterways, Bon, of getting folks connected to the great water activities in Kenmore on the lake and the Sammamish slough or river. And we do have some funds at the county through a car rental tax called our Youth and Amateur Sports Recreation Program. And we have topped that off. Obviously, the car rental market was really adversely hit. Hertz went bankrupt and others. There wasn't a lot of actual cars being rented for a while there last year. And so the tax went down, but we topped it off because you could restore those funds. And so we're able to bring some dollars in for activities for all folks. And this was, we got the First Lady there, Mayor Baker, down at the Waterfront Activity Center with the dragon boats. And I promised I would go out on one of them. I haven't done that yet, but I'm going to. And I was very excited to learn about the significant park improvements you all are doing next door to this site. It looks like it's going to really even further expand access to the water front and have some hopefully good environmental benefits. And let's see, another $20,000 over to the rowing club. Councilmember Shrebnick was a strong advocate for this, and it was fun to see and talk with some of her colleagues and to see all the rowing shells in the boathouse, which is already pretty much full. But this was a great group, and I had previously visited with Councilmember Shrebnick to learn more about it. And it's pretty exciting to see folks of all ages come out to the water and be facilitated in doing so. Our goal here is to be able to help you get equipment or pay membership dues for folks that can't afford it, lower the cost of access to these activities and sports, which can be kind of pricey. We put some money into the Inglemore Lacrosse Club. Councilmember McNeil over in Bothell has been a strong advocate there. And we're bringing some smaller dollar grants to the Rotary Club to give them flexible dollars to help with what they're doing in the community. And of course, we know we work together on the boathouse, and it's just a cool facility. Transit, big changes coming this week, October 2nd, with the 3 light rail stations opening up. Councilmember or Deputy Mayor Herbig obviously has a big interest in transit and mobility issues. And Mayor Baker, of course, serves on the Sound Transit Board. You know, they did the North Area Mobility restructure, and these are just some highlights on some of the changes. I guess what I would say is not major investments in transit, hopefully not major cuts. There are some routing changes that will occur, and we've got a couple maps. I always find it best if you have a particular transit route that you go to the website and just check it out, because the maps with the overlying colors are complicated. But our big goal, I think, here for the next few years will be to get transit connections to the new light rail spine at the stations opening as they come north. And there's a fair bit of work for that next stage along that 145th corridor that we've got to do, which will be the main connection. Where light rail doesn't serve, like South Lake Union and also Pill Hill with the hospitals, we are focused on continuing to have direct bus service there. So that is a high-level summary of, I think, all those words. And I think we can, Elizabeth, flip through the maps, a couple of maps there, a current network and then the revised one. But I think my takeaway message is this Saturday, bus service is changing. All right. Finally, I'll end, this will be the last substantive slide. I've been working with your city administration on funding from our flood district. The flood district is run by the county council members. We just put a different hat on. And it is administered, the programs in it, largely through our Department of Natural Resources and Parks. For most of its history, it has been a countywide tax. Every property owner in Kenmore pays it, but almost all of the money has been spent in the main stem rivers in the south. So particularly the Green and Duwamish, and then some out in the Snoqualmie Valley. But a large amount of it, and the Cedar River, has been south to protect that industrial warehouse district down there and make sure that it maintains its Corps of Engineers flood ratings. We've pivoted here in the last couple of years. Councilmember Up the Grove took over chairing the district to add more of an environmental component that's allowed under the state law. We're somewhat restricted, but we are bringing a more environmental approach and also a philosophy of getting away from building dikes and man-made, managerial tools and trying to return our waterways to more natural floodplains, things that are healthier for fish, accounting for the ecological benefits in our investments as well. So for the first time, we were able to add the Sammamish to our planning efforts. We have $1.2 million in there. And the planning work, frankly, has been delayed. Your city manager, Mr. Kerlindsey, has started to rattle my cage saying, hey, we got to get on this. So we've had some work with our leadership to kind of move this along. And it's going to, I think the initial planning work will start. As you all know from trying to even put in a little float on the river, doing anything on the water in the Sammamish in particular is a complex thing because of the Corps of Engineers, the feds, other fed agencies, our tribal partners. And so this is work that I think will take some time, but we got to get going. And I did, in just talking with Rob about this here in our recent meeting, suggest that perhaps we could have a working group of city leaders from Kenmore, but also Bothell, Woodinville, Redmond, the other jurisdictions along the river, and community partners to oversee and make suggestions and guide this work as it goes forward. Because I think the 1.2 million is just an initial investment, and there'll be more dollars to come, but I think we should bring folks together along the corridor to make sure we succeed. And I just want to end with good things are happening in Kenmore. It was fun earlier this year to spend a little time with Councilmember Kugler and O'Kane and Deputy Mayor Herbig. And Deborah, I think you two were there out at the lodge opening. And we grabbed a little snack afterwards, had a nice lunch, and Councilmember File was there as well. And I don't know if you had to give a notice of quorum or not. might have been close, but I just appreciate the privilege to work alongside all of you. Obviously, you're the primary jurisdiction in the city, but as the regional government and a service provider in the environmental space and the transit space, the human services and housing space, because those are issues that you care about, I want to make sure that we're here to work with you. And when you have a strong leadership team at the council like you do, and your administration like you do, it sure makes it a lot easier to convince my colleagues to send some money and stand with you. So I want to thank you all for all that you're doing and the opportunity to work with you. And I'm happy to take questions, Mr. Mayor.
You're muted, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Deputy Mayor.
First off, I want to thank Councilmember Dembowski for just this great partnership with the city. Couple of questions. Are there any updates? Can you give us any updates on the sheriff search and kind of the other work that the county is doing to redefine how we approach public safety?
Yeah, thank you, Deputy Mayor Herbig. Great question. And I should have probably included a slide on that, but you'll recall that voters last November adopted a couple of charter amendments in this space. There were actually a few, but one was to shift to an appointed sheriff, shift back to an appointed sheriff, which was the case from 1968 until the early 90s, I think. And the current sheriff is in her office until the end of the year. Mitzi Jahanknik is there till the end of the year. And then as part of that, I added some language that said we would have a community advisory process to make sure that the public remained involved in a way. And then there was another charter amendment that said, hey, we should be able to adjust the duties and responsibilities of the sheriff's office. Now, this matters, of course, as you all know, but for maybe the viewing public, why are they talking about the sheriff? Obviously, Kenmore is a contract city, along in my district with Shoreline and Woodinville and 7 others around the county. And we really, as a contract provider, want to be responsive to your needs of the residents in Kenmore and what you as policymakers want. So it's kind of a partnership. Your city manager, Rob Carlindsey, has been an active participant in this process. 2 of the seats on the advisory group belong to the cities, and Rob participates in that. It actually helps lead all of the cities' roles. And I think they are about to come out with some recommendations at a high level. We couldn't restructure our whole police response system in a few months, obviously, but they're going to have some recommendations on policy areas that we should work on going forward with respect to the structures and duties. On the appointment of the sheriff, Nigel, I think what I'm understanding is we'll probably have an interim sheriff. The county executive will appoint an interim sheriff who will be there for a few months into 2021. You know, we need a smooth transition later this year, obviously, for the department and for the public. And they want to take their time in finding, you know, do a nationwide search and find the best person for the job. So they don't feel, as I understand it, the executive's office, they can get that done before the end of the year. So interim sheriff and then permanent in partnership with the community. And Rob, if I got something wrong there, let me know.
No, yeah, you nailed it. The committee's deadline is this Thursday, and the committee will be meeting one last time this Thursday and putting the finishing touches on the document.
Great. And I know for Rob and other cities, the kind of menu of services has been an important thing. And I sense that has resonated with folks.
Thanks.
Councilmember Marshall, Mayor Baker, is raising his
I
hand.
didn't see his hand. There he is, over in the corner. Thank you.
Thank you. So speaking of one of the greatest things about Kenmore, our access to water, what are your thoughts on how the county can help us move towards a public pool?
Well, as you'll recall, I had an amendment to our regional parks levy, or you may not recall, but I put an amendment on our parks levy, my penny for pools initiative, and we hung it on late, and it maybe was one of the more popular things. I think we underfunded with a penny, but you know, you can only do so much. And that's is divided into 2 parts. One is a planning grant component at $100,000 a pop, and then the other is a capital grants component up to $5 million per project. And Joe, you know, there's a desperate need. After our forward thrust pools that were built in the late 60s and early 70s, they've aged out. You know, we've lost the one at St. Ed's years ago. Shoreline just closed theirs. North Shore Schools is, you know, they've got teams. They're desperate for one. Our challenge a little bit in the north end is, and Kenmore sits at the top of the pyramid, is that lake kind of divides. You got North Shore over here and Shoreline Schools here, and there's a lot of demand. And really it's how do we serve it? Because there's needs across the north end for swimming pools, and there's tremendous demand. I know you all hear it, I hear it. So Rob is, I think, leading an effort in partnership with other jurisdictions to apply for two of the $100,000 planning grants, and look at two options for the pool response. And that's kind of, as I understand it, where we're at. Rob, what would you add to that?
Not much. And thankfully we have Stephanie Lukash that's also able to help with this, and she's running point on this for us.
Oh, good. There's Stephanie. I'm sorry I forgot your name, Stephanie. Stephanie was great in this housing meeting we had. So, Rob, I don't know if that answers your question. Big picture, I think that, there's been some plans. There's an old one sitting at the North Shore Park and Rec Service area that we could tune up, or maybe you start fresh. I think there's opportunities maybe at Lake Point, with an integrated community center, or elsewhere. It'll take a bunch of partners, including the school district, the county, the cities coming together, and maybe either the MPRSA, or I know Rob likes a different structure, or maybe a Metropolitan Parks District. We're gonna have to bring some local dollars to it. But I think this $100,000 planning grant process will be the catalyst that actually brings some structure and momentum to it, so we can get a proposal or two on paper and bring folks together to advance it.
Thank you, sir.
Any other questions?
Looks like Deputy Mayor Herbig
There you
and
go.
Councilmember File. She didn't have a chance.
Oh, yeah, Councilmember File.
Thank you. I have just a couple comments in regards to the radar programs. It fits our community very well. It has a high response rate, but we did hear that our radar responders sometimes have to wait for an officer because they are short officers on our end to be able to respond. And given that domestic violence and overdoses and whatnot is all on the rise, it's an issue that we do need to be cognizant of, even though policing and funding is being cut in King County in some ways. So I wanted to make sure to highlight that behavioral health, mental health need for our communities with correlation to that program. And I do hear you're doing some work on considering the CPACE funding program there, and I am wholeheartedly in support of such an equitable program to bring environmental, sustainable funding opportunities to enhance those building methods that will further our objectives. And other than that, I do want to know, what's your thoughts on behavioral health ordinances for municipalities?
Well, thank you, Councilmember File. Just taking those in order. I appreciate the feedback from the front lines on the need for additional officers. King County has not suffered the departures like the city of Seattle has, but we definitely have openings and are hiring. And frankly, we have not cut our law enforcement budget over the years. I think the council, frankly, has added a little bit over the exec. Some of it was specialty services like Marine or helicopter. But I want to make sure folks know that we've not cut. In fact, I've said, I think we need to stand both sides up, and for better law enforcement, we need better training and more investment and hiring even better folks and recruitment of higher quality folks. Not saying that we don't have high quality folks now. I think frankly, most feedback I get about our sheriff's office from my constituents is very positive. On the CPACER, I'm the sponsor of the legislation transmitted by the executive. It's basically will help us to decarbonize our built environment. Next to transportation, the built environment is the biggest emitter of greenhouse gases. And it's a using of the county's terrific bonding and credit authority to make those projects more affordable. It matters to Kenmore in part because they want to use it out at St. Ed's. And they've reached out, Kevin Daniels there, to me to say, hey, they hope to be able to use the project for their property. So I think that we will pass that this year and bring it online. And I would need to know more about what you mean by the behavioral health ordinances. Obviously, we have a large role there at the county with our mid and funding in that space from our levies, but I'm not sure exactly what you mean on that one.
Well, the legislature did fund program funding for housing in relation to serving our local communities with correlation to behavioral health needs. And one of the pathways to doing that is through the Washington State Department of Commerce. And they recommend first for cities to adopt a behavioral health ordinance in order to plug in the funding that counties and cities would need. So this is something I recently attended. I'm kind of excited about, and I just thought to gather your perspective for our partners here today and see what you thought about that.
It's something I'm going to have to learn more about, maybe from you. I apologize for not being up to speed on it, and I would welcome the opportunity to learn more about it. It sounds good.
Sounds like a great plan. And in reference to the Seed Pacer program, that matters also for Kenmore, because if King County adopts that program, we also have the option in the future. So it's all great funding opportunities and great ways to build our infrastructure with environmental sustainability. So thank you.
I appreciate that. I would just take this opportunity to say on the climate change space, because you all are leading on this, I believe we got to do more faster. And I've floated the idea of a climate bond to bring forward future decades of money. Because I think if we were 20 or 30 years out, folks there, our kids, our grandkids, or others will look back and say, well, did they do everything they could? I would gladly have paid some money then to make changes. And that's what a bond is, right? Bringing future dollars forward to make those investments today. And I think we can do it in our transit fleet, more transit and greener transit faster. I think we can do it in our land conservation initiative for carbon sequestration and response to the impacts, for example, tree canopy loss. And in the built environment to help folks decarbonize their buildings, get off gas, get off oil, do the insulation, make them greener. It takes some money. We can do it in an equitable way. So those that are too often, because they don't have the financial resources, are left out of these, that we can make sure they're not left behind. And we just got to figure out how to pay for it. So I'm hoping to work over the next 6 to 9 months with community on the idea of a climate bond. If any of you are interested in that, I would love to talk to you. But I just think today, thank you, Councilmember O'Kane. I know that's a big deal for you. I just think we have an opportunity here. And there's a demand, I'll say this, in the public finance marketplace, people that buy bonds for that kind of product. Increasingly, investors want socially responsible investments to make. They don't want to invest in Exxon, and the oil companies. They want to invest in their mandates, their charters, and their stockholders are telling them, or their beneficiaries and pension funds, do good with your money. That's driving the cost of that debt down, and it makes it very affordable. So I'm hoping I would love to work with you all on that. And with Kenmore, our K4C initiative and the toolkit that's in the Strategic Climate Action Plan, there's a lot of good ideas in there. How about some money to go with them? That's the vision.
So just because of your wanting to electrify transit, Kenmore's new bus rapid transit system that's coming online with the opening of the light rail station at 148th is going to be all electric. We're starting with 50% electric on that new line, and we'll go to 100%. We'll be the first in the county. Deputy Mayor.
Couple of quick questions. So we have the regional authority getting stood up for dealing with homelessness. The health through housing units, are those going to be turned over to the regional authority at the beginning of the year, or are those staying in King County?
Plan, I think, Nigel, is to keep those in King County. I think the thinking being we're going to turn over our service contracts that the new entity will probably have its hands full getting those, brought in and managed. And I'm not sure that we would say never, that those wouldn't be turned over. We'll kind of see how that goes. But the sense is, I think that we'll see how it goes. And I'm on that. I'm hopeful. I don't know if I can say I'm optimistic, but I'm hopeful. I mean, we worked very hard to make sure that our regional players, our cities, had an equal voice at that table. That was very controversial. I was writing the thing in my office, and some folks didn't like that, including Mayor Durkin of Seattle. But I think it's said that it's a regional problem requiring a regional solution. And my view is we should have our regional leaders at the table to be there. And it didn't matter to me that you weren't yet writing checks. You have a lot of other authority, zoning and land use and political support. And we've got to work together on it. And people bring different assets to the challenge. And I want to give it every chance. I think as a region, we can't give up on it too soon. Let's give it a chance. One of our challenges in responding to homelessness is every few years, we got a new initiative. The thing about the Regional Homeless Authority is it is regional. We are integrating the resources. We will have a combined plan. I may not like everything in the plan. You may not like everything in the plan. Let's set that aside. Once the region buys off on the plan, let's give it our best shot. That's my attitude on it, and I hope we will.
And then kind of changing subjects really quickly. I'm seeing a lot of folks down in Seattle are pushing for Seattle to kind of do their own transportation bond or something to speed up Sound Transit or supplement Sound Transit, that sort of thing. And I know we've had this conversation before, but I'm going to pitch again for a regional take on that. Because we know once Seattle goes alone, the votes aren't there for the rest of the county to do our own thing. We need Seattle votes in order to do that. But I think, and Seattle has always been wary of doing a countywide ballot because of suburban votes. I think we've proven over the last few years that dynamic doesn't exist anymore. Suburban voters are very much in favor of transit. I really hope that before Seattle tries to go forward with their own thing for either housing or transit, that we really try to have a regional discussion around it, because I think we can do a heck of a lot more as a county than we can as Seattle doing their thing and then 39 other cities doing their own separate thing. And these are issues that we need to be tackling as a region. So I hope that, to see King County making those pushes too, and trying to work things out with Seattle so we can go together as a region.
Thank you for that, Nigel. I think you're right on. I agree with you wholeheartedly. It's more resources. And you are right about the old thinking and the new reality. And the new reality is the 522 coalition passed ST3. When you look at the numbers and you look at the votes, when you came together and put in the plan, the votes were very high, and our folks vote. In a county council election in the first district, there may be 45,000 votes. In a district in maybe another part of the county, there literally could be half that. We have highly educated voters who want to make these investments and improvements. And if we engage them in a way from the beginning in planning, they will. So on particularly those two issues.
Thanks.
Any other questions? John, Councilmember Kugler.
Thank you, Mayor Baker. And thank you, Councilmember Dembowski, for coming tonight and sharing these updates for all of our council and for our residents who are participating or will watch later. I know you mentioned the municipal parks idea, and I wanted to just drive that home a little bit more. Here in Kenmore, we don't have a lot of active recreational fields. We have to take our kids to neighboring cities, and we would love to be a good neighbor and also have fields for our own kids to use in our own city. I know we have residents who are probably here tonight to speak on that as well. And so in addition to a public pool, we would love any funding or opportunities to collaborate on active, fields for all types of sports. The other thing that I just wanted to put on your radar, and maybe I'm just early in my research on this, but I'm noticing that as housing becomes more expensive in our area, that it's putting the squeeze, especially on our seniors who are on fixed incomes. And there doesn't seem to be a lot of resources. There seems to be resources if you're like right on the verge of, not being able to pay rent that month, or if you need food, but nothing on a sustainable, ongoing basis. And I really worry about them long term and what's going to happen to them. So just want to put that on your radar. And I'm not sure if you know of anything available for them, but I haven't come across any good resources for that thus far.
Thank you, Councilmember Kruger. Yes, just if I can briefly respond, the lack of adequate ball field capacity is a big deal. And I was working today on some language in our Best Starts for Kids levy. I worked with Councilmember McNeil again from Bothell to put in a capital grants piece of 50, and it's going to be $50 million. And that is for kind of community facilities. And in North Shore, we're missing kind of, if you all know, really a community center for young people. And it's our vision and hope that we can plan for that and build it. And I think sports fields, ball fields should definitely be included. You know, we put some of that money that ended up going at the boathouse. That was for kind of ball fields, but we changed course there. That youth and amateur sports dollar stream will continue to be there, and I think we can use that for that initiative. I mean, I'm hopeful, as I've talked to many of you, as you work toward the vision for Lake Point, that there will be a large public space component there. I don't want to get too much into your business, Rob. that's your all's deal, but that's such special space, and given the nature of the property and the cost to develop something, big as you go further out, and also the issues with Kenmore Air and other things, I'm hoping that we can bring active space for the public there. On the senior and property tax issue, it's a big deal. One thing that anybody watching should know, and that I hope you will share, maybe in a city newsletter, is we recently raised the state the income numbers to qualify for our senior tax, property tax exemption and reduction. And now, this is ballpark, Elizabeth is my expert on this. We've helped literally my office, hundreds of seniors in the last year go through this process, but it's about $55,000 of annual income. And it's a different, under state law, it's different than your federal income. So you've got to actually fill out the forms. But if you go to kingcounty.gov and search property tax, senior property tax exemption, it'll come up. If you can't find it, call or email my office, we'll get it for you. And the First County Council District is the #1 user of this program. Of all of the county, more seniors apply and qualify for it than anywhere else in the county, in part because I think we have a lot of folks who purchased affordable kind of middle class or working class homes. The price of the home value has gone like this. Their income has stayed like that. And it's a significant burden, as you point out. So that's not a lot of money, but it covers a lot of folks. There's also some relief for folks who are disabled or who are veterans. And the relief can be from regular property taxes, but also some of our special levies. And you can get it varies. It's kind of a sliding scale based on your income. But I really want to appreciate you raising that, call folks' attention to it. And did I leave anything out of that, Elizabeth?
No, that was really good. It's the income threshold is 58,400, and it had previously been 40,000 set statewide at 40,000.
There you go. 58.4. All right.
Councilmember File.
Thank you. And the last thing is affordable housing. 80% threshold is market rate housing, and it's definitely not affordable housing. When we think about our seniors and our hardworking workforce labor, we need housing for our community at under 30% and that 40% of the mean. If we're not hitting there, we're going to be fueling homelessness. Rates are going up, they're not going down. And meanwhile, our senior and disabled incomes, their thresholds, or our senior retired on fixed incomes, their income is flat. It's not rising in comparison or equal to our local housing rates. And we really must make this a priority across our region and for Kenmore if we're going to really make a difference. And so I know you care very deeply about our seniors, but we just really do have to dig deeper and do more here.
Yes, thank you, Councilmember Fowle. Agree. And of course, the county through our Housing Trust Fund, all of which is really authorized by the state in terms of funding it, which has increased the document recording fees and brought additional dollars. There is a pretty healthy stream of affordable housing money, whether it be transitory and development, workforce housing, or just other projects. There is money to do these projects that we can bring. And your administration, of course, Mayor Baker co-chaired the Regional Affordable Housing Task Force, but we are in regular touch with your administration about specific sites in the city to bring projects online. And as they get ready, I can assure you, we've reserved dollars at the county for the North End, and the city will be very competitive to bring money to the table. The Regional Affordable Housing Strategy, Mayor Baker remind me, but with respect to public dollars, we really did prioritize in our recommendations there that 0 to 30% AMI space. And of course, there's other programs like the tax credit program for 80% and 70%. You can kind of buy your way down. And I know you all are working on the missing middle, which has been a priority for your council. So the county, we will play an important role there. Obviously, we have money in our VSHSL levy, the Veteran Seniors and Human Services levy. There isn't enough, and we may, Councilmember Devin Herberg, as you pointed out, may be headed at some point for a regional housing levy. Seattle's done it for years. It's a fair bit of money. I don't know if it doesn't produce a lot of units, so we would want to, look at how are we gonna get enough units out of it, but plenty to do there.
So
Thank you.
one of the concerns, as long as we're on this topic, is the county's received a few $100 million to sort of help with some of these people that are behind in rent. But it's not going to go that far. There's a lot of people out there. I know that we've taken some of our ARPA money and we're distributing it to people in need. But there's such a huge number of people that that haven't been able to afford their rent for many months. Their bill is climbing and getting higher and higher. And we have got older retired people that own 1 or 2 rental units that are now getting into their retirement benefits to try to keep them afloat because people are not paying the rent. And I just don't know what we're going to be able to do for the small time property. We have a couple here in Kenmore, plus the people that are getting further and further behind on their rent. It seems like, we can extend the moratorium all we want to, but those people are just going further and further and further into debt. So somebody's got to come up with an answer somewhere.
Yeah, as I mentioned, David, we've done about $350 million of appropriations. There may be some more state help coming. I didn't put it on there because we don't want to promise it, but I know that the state legislature is looking at that, and we may have some more dollars coming. And folks that are watching that are in this situation should also know, say if you're a tenant, that there's been some changes in state law that now require, prior to an eviction, that the parties enter into a mediation to try and reach resolution before the court will grant a writ of restitution to a landlord. I have suggested to Leo Floor, our Department of Community Human Services person, that we actually have a table trying to break through the red tape, have a table with a check writer sitting down at the eviction court. If the parties reach agreement, get the landlord paid, get them caught up, and give the tenant a little cushion, and just cut through. We have all the programs and the applications and all that, but somebody at that stage is in a real hurt. The landlord's frustrated because she hasn't been, paid for months and can't work it out. The tenant's scared, they're about to lose their housing. That is the point where you can get parties, who are at that place to solve it with some money, and we could do it efficiently. So I'm hopeful that our department is going to do that. Leo seemed to like the idea.
But, looking at the next step, you're there ready to write the check and you get them caught up. And if they don't have a job or they don't have the means to stay caught up, you're back in this again.
Yep.
Okay, anybody else? Thank you. It's always a pleasure to have you here with us. You have done so much for our community, and you continue to do things for our community and all the communities in your district. You know, that's the one unique thing about you is you really, really care about the communities you serve. And thank you. Thank you very much.
No, thank you all. And you have my number and you can reach out to me, and it's nobody does the work alone. It sure is a hell of a lot easier when you have engaged elected city council members and strong city administration, which not every city has. The seniority that you have, the responsiveness you have there. Kenmore it's a great city to have in my district. So I appreciate you all individually and collectively. And
You're very, very lucky.
I am very lucky.
Best staffers around. Elizabeth.
I wanted to end by thanking Elizabeth and just to brag here if I can, one brag. I've been on the council 8 years, and my 3 staffers have been with me 8 years. I have the longest serving staff at the council, and I think that's because of their patience, not necessarily who the boss is.
You also get to work with Mayor Baker and the wonderful city of Kemper.
Yeah.
Thanks so much.
Appreciate you all.
Appreciate it.
Thanks for the extended time tonight.
You betcha. All right. Next item on the agenda is citizen comments. And we want to welcome you to our community members to the council's meeting. In this forum, the council cannot engage or dialogue with the public. And the primary role of the council is to listen. All comments must be addressed to the mayor and city council. And please use the raise hand feature if you wish to speak. The clerk will acknowledge your request and will call your name when it's your turn. Your time will start when we confirm that we can hear you. And please state your name and city of residence for the record and keep your comments to the allotted time. Your time cannot be granted to another, and your time and your clock time will not be reset unless there are extenuating circumstances and the presiding officer has expressly allowed it. Screen sharing is not allowed, and you can submit materials to the council or clerk in advance. And please do not comment about pending development projects on which the council will make future decisions, as those are quasi-judicial in matters, and the council must limit their communications about such matters. And this meeting is being recorded, and thank you for your time, for taking the time to express your comments. Madam Clerk, will you please call the first person?
Thank you very much, Mayor Baker. We have quite a few guests with us this evening. I'd like to take them in this order. The first batch being Christiana Matthews, Doug Levy, Vicki Grayland, John Peoples, David Morton, and David Dorian. Christiana Matthews, you'll be first. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so you can see the timer. Tell me when you can see that.
We can see it.
Very good. And we're going to try something a little bit new today for all of our speaking guests. At the 30-second mark, I'm going to play this chime. That'll alert you that you have 30 seconds to wrap up your comments. Ms. Matthews?
Can you hear me?
We can. Go ahead.
Thank you so much for letting me speak tonight. My name is Christiana Matthews. In May of this year, on the 17th, City Council meeting, Mayor Baker declared that the city would be focusing on pedestrian and cyclist safety. If the city were really focusing on pedestrian and cyclist safety, then why on earth would the city manager and the city engineer approve such a huge and unsafe variance to the entrance of the Balburney townhome development? This is not a future development. This is an actual development that's happening right now. A huge variance that goes against Kenmore's own safety regulations that require a minimum of 100 feet between intersections. A variance being allowed in an already unsafe, busy intersection. So unsafe that the city had to put in a crosswalk at 68th and 190th because people were injured by cars in it. an intersection for a huge 83-unit townhome development that is directly in front of an elderly couple's driveway. 2+ years ago, in a meeting with the city manager responsible for the decision of this intersection, the city engineer, John Vicente, was asked if he had driven the exact drive one would make to enter the development. He said he had not made the actual drive. How could such a big safety decision be made with such little information and experience? I used a drone to film cars making the actual turn on a 68th into the development, and suffice to say, the video is alarming. Kenmore should be protecting its residents and creating progress. These are not mutually exclusive. We can have more housing and protect existing residents at the same time. Any Kenmore city management or planner who cannot provide protection to the tax-paying residents who live next to these projects they approve should not be working for our city. Kenmore needs more housing, and developers need Kenmore's land to make a profit, but we also need to be responsible about it. City management needs to be held accountable for the projects they approve that put the tax-paying residents in unsafe conditions, because it is our taxes that fund the progress that they like to brag about. I am proposing that the city council and the city management reevaluate the variance by visually inspecting the entrance and making the actual drive as if they were living there. Reevaluate the traffic flow, which will most likely necessitate the entrance to be moved to obey Kenmore's own safety regulation, or add another entrance to this huge development to reduce the amount of traffic in the already busy intersection. Thank you so much for listening and for your time. I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Matthews. Doug Levy,
Hi there, can you hear me?
we can go ahead.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and council members. I'm Doug Levy. I'm here as a Kenmore citizen and a volunteer working with other volunteers across softball and Little League and soccer leagues. And we're here running with the baton that we just got from Councilmember Kugler a few minutes ago, urging that the council and the mayor take both short-term and long-term steps to do right by our kids and figure out a way to bring more fields for youth into this community. You know, if I dial back 18+ months when the council had a split decision over the St. Edward's ball field project, that didn't go forward, and we know that there was a division on that. But where there was unanimity among all speakers was that everyone said that they were supportive of fields for kids. And now we have a chance to make a difference and do that. And one of the things we'd like to urge you to do, we understand you'll have a beginning of 2022 retreat to map out your priorities. We would strongly suggest that one of those priorities could be to establish a task force with folks from all parts of the spectrum, looking at how you can identify field spaces that work in Kenmore for kids to play. And you may even be able to pair that up with other work you're doing, as I understand it, on things like public works maintenance needs. So that would be a longer term effort. There are things you can do immediately and in the very short term. One of them was referenced tonight when you heard from Bastyr, and that's to get a longer term lease nailed down with Bastyr so that the fields there aren't touch and go and they're more permanent and sustainable for the community. Another advantage you have, you've done good work to upgrade Morelands, but it's situated in a way where you could use directional and modern lighting and make that field accessible for more hours of the day for more kids and do better by our kids. When you are on a city council, and frankly, when you are a resident of a community, the decisions you make are not just for 6 months or a year or 2 years. They have reverberations and implications for years, for decades. And if we want to claim, as we should in Kenmore, that we're about quality of life and promoting quality of life assets, then we need to do that. And if we cannot tell our kids that there are going to be places to play in Kenmore rather than having their parents drive them to Kirkland and Woodinville and Bothell, then shame on all of us as a community. If we cannot tell them that there are good alternatives to having a video stick in their hand to play video games instead of going out to play outside and having places to do it, then shame on all of us as a community. And if we cannot tell them,
If I can jump in, Your Honor, his time is up in our city clerk. Oh, she's back. She got kicked off the internet, but now she's back.
Thank you, Mr. Levy. That actually concludes your time.
yeah, just urging you to do right by our kids with fields. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Vicki Grayland.
Thank you. I'm Vicki Grayland and I live in Kenmore. As the Kenmore Chair of People for Climate Action, I especially like what I've heard so far about investing in mitigating the climate crisis. And I'd also like to say that idea of putting artificial turf at St. Edward's and destroying a wetland is a bad idea and would be for the next 100 years, talking about perpetuity. Congratulations on all the money going into basic needs during the pandemic and to the money going to getting people into the Sammamish River. I'm going to use my privilege tonight to talk about the original inhabitants of the river, the salmon. If we don't get the temperature down in that river, we won't have any salmon. Please consider the mental health of the population is affected by the grief over climate change and species extinction. Thank you for moving forward with the Sammamish River restoration planning. Remember when last year when the nonprofit Forterra appeared before the city council and talked about restoration of the river? Remember that the council had concerns that Forterra used a form of glyphosate to kill non-native plants? Remember our own city director of environmental services, Richard Sawyer, stating in his river report that despite Kenmore's effort to kill non-native plants, that they continue to migrate from other towns upriver. What's needed? A coordinated effort. There's an adage that the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, and the second best time is right now. Let's plant those trees, lower the river temperature, and save those fish. Also, let's make a condition of this grant that no toxic chemicals be used. Kenmore has found a way by using mechanical means of removing the non-native plants without using chemicals. To repeat, let's release that money now. Don't delay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Grayland. John Peoples.
Good evening, everybody. I trust everyone's enjoying the rain and the deluge and getting around just fine. As I listened tonight, I jotted down a few notes. The first is that Mr. Dembowski talked about a drop in tax revenue from Hertz and other car rental places last year. And he almost seemed to make light of it. But what I don't recall is that the King County government made cuts to its own operations. I don't recall ever hearing that they laid people off. I don't recall hearing that elected officials donated their salaries. And I'd like to know eventually which charity got Mr. Dembowski's salary after all of the people were laid off in King County. It just seems a little odd that government would continue plowing ahead, spending our money as our tax base dwindled last year. Also, when helping people get back on their feet, I noticed the lack of programs that are geared toward helping people with personal finance education. I would like to think that Kenmore and King County government would be interested in helping people become financially independent and therefore not dependent on government. And yet so many government programs are designed to keep people dependent on government and not financially able to move on and rise up by themselves. And I couldn't help but notice that there were no masks in the picture at the lodge. with Mr. Dembowski. If Kenmore wants a public pool, there's no reason in the world that we can't make that arrangement ourselves. I'm not quite certain that we need the county government to help us with that. Yet another plea for no traffic radar auto enforcement. If people made the laws, then people need to enforce them with their own two eyes. And thank you, Mayor Baker, for mentioning the predicament of older, especially landlords, whose incomes and wealth are dependent on their rentals that have been clobbered by government putting its thumb on the scale. And government really caused this latest disaster. And I'd like to second Mr. Levy for the Little League space. There's plenty of natural grass around to do it on natural grass, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Peoples. David Morton.
Good evening, council members. I'm David Morton. I live near Redmond. A carcinogen is something that can cause you to have cancer. It may be a substance in the air, a product you use, or a chemical in foods and drinks. Having contact with a carcinogen does not mean that you'll get cancer. Your chance of getting cancer depends on many things, such as the quantity and concentration of carcinogen, your frequency and duration of exposure. Your genes also play a role. Some substances are known to be human carcinogens, and others are reasonably anticipated to be human carcinogens. According to the EPA document AP42, considered by PSCAA to be the authority on air emissions from asphalt plants, there are at least 16 known and anticipated carcinogens in the emissions from asphalt plants. People near asphalt plants breathe these emissions. That does not mean these people will get cancer. Looking for a cancer cluster near Cadman's asphalt plant in Kenmore does not help to measure the immediate debilitating effects that asphalt fumes have on people. Some effects from breathing Cadman's asphalt fumes have been described by Kenmore residents Janet and Bob Hayes. In a formal statement, Janet said, "I saw the asphalt plume. After about 5 minutes, I noticed the odor, heavy, and my throat began to itch. Then tasting the emissions, eyes itching also. My throat and eye reactions are always followed by for hours by headache. My bronchi and lungs felt inflamed. Once you get the taste and the smell in the back of your throat, you have it and smell it all day." Bob commented, "The plant emits smoke, very nasty smell, causing me to have burning eyes, running nose, and some throat irritation. This is ongoing throughout the day, every day except weekends. We cannot even go outside when this is going on, so if you want to get some fresh air, you can't." Kenmore City Hall is not immune to the sickening effects of the plant's asphalt fumes. Kenmore's city manager has complained to PSCAA about the asphalt plant. Quote, "Strong smell of asphalt fumes in and around City Hall. Several city employees are complaining. One says it is making her feel sick." End quote. Cancer is not the immediate problem. The urgent problem is that people are made sick and miserable by Cadman's toxic asphalt fumes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Morton. David Dorian.
Can you hear me?
We can. Go ahead.
Great. My name is David Dorian. I live in Kenmore. I'm speaking in support of the council ratifying Ordinance 21-0536 to extend the temporary moratorium on rental evictions. It's been great to see the council's leadership on this issue, and I hope the council will continue to show that leadership tonight, following the example of the cities of Seattle and Burien, which have both extended their moratoriums. The state of Washington has only extended weaker protections through October 31st. So to give our neighbors peace of mind, we need our Kenmore City Council to continue to take action, as has been the case in previous ordinances. I know there's a very packed agenda tonight, so I'm not going to say more than that. I just note that it's the last agenda on the business, it's the last item on the business agenda, but it's vital to extend Kenmore's eviction moratorium this evening. So we really appreciate your time and attention to this matter to help those in our community who are struggling. Thank you. I cede the rest of my time.
Thank you, Mr. Dorian. The next group of guests we'd like to hear from are Pastor Anya Hellman, followed by Stacy V, Danny Howe, Elizabeth Mooney, and Paul Dame. Pastor Anya Hellman.
Hello, can you all hear me?
We can.
Wonderful. I'm Pastor Anya Hellman from North Lake Lutheran Church in Kenmore, and I live at 7427 Northeast 198th Place in Kenmore as well. I'm here tonight to ask you to please extend the moratorium. Seattle, as David just mentioned, Seattle and Burien have both already extended theirs, and with Governor Inslee not extending the moratorium statewide, it makes our city moratoriums even more important than they previously were. Many people are beginning to work again. I'm hearing this from folks, but they have a huge amount of debt. They need time and financial assistance for both the renters and any landlords who are willing to work with their renters. I'm also here to speak to a proposal I hear that is on the table by the Planning Commission to get rid of all zoning for single family homes. I'm actually not against this, but if we make this change, I'd like to challenge council to consider how we can make this change and ensure the new higher density homes that are built will not be fancy style living catered to the wealthiest among us. How can we provide affordable options, some that are rentals and some that are smaller single family homes that first time buyers can actually afford? During the time I've lived in Kenmore, I've seen so many green spaces get torn down in order to build $1 million homes. It's bad enough to lose green spaces, but when it's in order to cater to the wealthy, we have a lose-lose situation, and the only thing winning is greed. The people who can afford those homes are not the people we need to serve. So if we're going to raise the density across Kenmore, I say let's do it, but let's do it so we can build a more diverse, safe community for all. The high-level plan must include a requirement for a high percentage of new housing to be affordable. And by high percentage, I mean 50% or higher. And by affordable, I mean between 20 and 70% AMI. I know developers are not attracted to these kinds of projects, but if we're really trying to help the people who are getting pushed out, then why would we want the developers who don't have the same priority to come? So the ideal setup for a truly integrated, diverse society is for every neighborhood to have both affordable homes and wealthy homes. So it's hard to tell the difference between them. We already have wealthy homes. It's time to start building affordable so we can achieve a more balanced percentage. And it's simple math. Right now, we've got to be building more affordable than not. One more thing, the plan must include services that attend to the needs of those in our community whose entire paychecks are going toward paying rent and utilities, services for mental health, services for people struggling to survive. We need to make sure we are designing our newly dense neighborhoods in a way to keep everyone safe, including the people who cannot afford a car and will be relying on walking and buses for their transportation. So wrapping up, I've asked before whether something can be done to limit development to require a certain percentage of affordable homes. And I've been told that all the city can offer is incentives. I don't believe this is really all this.
Thank you, Pastor Hellman. Stacy V. Stacy V.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can, go ahead.
Stacy Valenzuela, Kenmore. We appreciate Kenmore being proactive and support the extension of the COVID eviction moratorium ordinance 210536 to the end of the year. Several times we have brought forward concerns of some property owners raising the rent by larger amounts and accumulating these amounts on those with lower fixed income during the pandemic. That's 1.5 years. We are aware of a few evictions that have happened during this time, as well as some tenants that have signed up with King County for COVID rent assistance program with their landlords and have yet to receive any funding. Kenmore is just accepting applications now for ARAP funds, but the chart does not include our low-income workers or seniors and disabled just above the threshold. We all know that we are still not seeing the end of this pandemic, and too many low and fixed income residents that are still awaiting unemployment as well could quickly become homeless. When the bond was passed for the waterways and walkways, the residents were promised sidewalks and areas as priority for safety. Cementing the natural habitat near the shoreline should never have been on the plans and will increase the greenhouse gases by 30% in that area, as well as hurt our ecosystems and our wildlife. We continually ask for the responded 2119 surveys as a priority for preservation of our natural habitat. We stress again that only natural materials like gravel be used in Tocha Park. The $1 million art for stamping the cement could be used on the bridge sidewalk outside the park instead. We appreciate the Kenmore postcard to remind and educate new residents if they wash their cars and use the car wash, or make sure the dirty water flows into the grass to protect our waterways from stormwater flow and contaminants. The city needs to be an example of this environmental stewardship as well. Another reason why they should apply to the handheld craft washing station at Tocha too, and should not be cement, but should be gravel. Washing of public works vehicles, driveway, parking lot, entry washing, and employees should also be following these practices. Also, the climate survey too is just as bad as the first one. The questions or the answers do not make sense. If an issue is a high priority, you want us to choose low importance. But if it's a low priority, you want us to choose high importance. How does this take a good survey? In the interest of the public and protection of public health, we have asked numerous times to request the environmentally concerned residents and local organizations call for testing and remediation of all contaminated lands in Kenmore.
JCV, thank you very much. Danny Howe?
Hi, Anastasia, can you hear me?
We can, go ahead.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. It's good to see you. Just thank you to all the council members for everything that you do for the city. I've met most of you. I'm a resident of Kenmore, a board member for North Lake Little League, and a Little League coach forever, I think. I wanted to provide comments on a couple things. First of all, some good news. I'm not here to complain with that good news. The North Lakes juniors team this year won the District 8 Tournament of Champions in July. This is your community baseball team, and they were able to beat North and Central Seattle, Woodinville, and other local teams to represent the city well. And I'm just so proud of that as good news, because I think a lot of the kids that took part in that team, I think Anastasia sent you a photo of that team. Most of those kids grew up in Kenmore, started with T-ball and worked their way up. If you have a chance, take a look at that photo, because there's some amazing kids. You'll see third from the left in the back, a kid named Rohan, who really blossomed in the program, is now playing high school baseball. And his goal today is really to get high school players to come back and teach young children in Kenmore how to play ball. So down below at the bottom, second from the left, you'll see a kid named Jaden Al-Katani. And he spent the first practice sitting near bleachers wanting to quit because he thought he was too small to play. 3 weeks later, he was starting at second, and now he wants to play high school ball. It was an important season for us. It was the first time in 2 years that kids could be a part of a team supporting each other, especially kids from different cultures and backgrounds, and post the pandemic. Most of these kids will go to high school together. 90% of these kids have no other place to go to play sports. Almost all of them could not afford the $3,000 to $5,000 it would cost to play select baseball. And we charge $275. I'd like to say that I've seen that life can be isolating for kids of color in Kenmore. What I've learned as a coach for the last decade is that taking part in a Little League can be really transformative and provide a support structure that's critical for their social and emotional development, something we don't always see. As you know, we've said this before, it's becoming increasingly difficult to find places for younger children to play in sports. Thank you, Councilman Kugler, for bringing that up. We strive to keep costs down, but at a certain point, having to go out and get fields and pay outside fields is unsustainable. So I'd like to just say, we'd like to work with you to see if there's a solution. Joe, we need a pool too. So I think we need to come together and we need to find these things for our children. And we will be a partner with you to be able to do that. We're here and ready to help. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Howell. Elizabeth Mooney.
Hi, council and staff and Councilmember Dembowski and citizens. I'm Elizabeth Mooney. I live in Kenmore and am president of PERC, People for Environmentally Responsible Kenmore, which incorporated in 2002, sort of in reaction to our incorporation of our city. Our mission statement, I'm going to read it to you, and then I'm going to announce an event that we're having this Thursday and Sunday at the Kenmore Hangar, which will be to hand out storm drain stencils that is an event for everybody. But our mission is to foster understanding and appreciation for our natural environment and to promote environmentally responsible practices with development and infrastructure within Kenmore and its surrounding areas. So I just want to first let you know that the event is going to be on Thursday, September 30th, between 1 o'clock and 4 p.m. And then again on Sunday, October 3rd, from 9:30 to 1:30 p.m. Volunteers will be at the Kenmore Hangar. It'll be pick up your free grab and go for stormwater salmon safe kits while the supplies last. And they will look like this. PERC partnered with the city on a love note about a year ago. And due to COVID, we weren't able to have our stream events and our lecture series. So thank you very much to the city and our volunteers. We're hoping to have people come over to the hangar, learn about what we can do to protect our salmon, and we'll be there to hand out the glue and talk about how to put them on your storm drains. And just looking forward to talking to you and teaching each other about protecting our environment. I also just want to say how much I appreciate the people who have spoken and what Rod Dembowski gave us as hope. I think talking about our lakefront would be fabulous, and working with all people, Mr. Howe, Mr. Levy, Stacy Valenzuela, Vicki Grayland, David Morton, on how to protect our fish and how to be environmentally responsible. I hope I can see all of you and talk about our mission statement and the work groups and our future as an environmentally healthy, happy family.
Thank you, Ms. Mooney. Paul Dame.
Can you hear me? Thank you.
We can, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Paul Dame, and I am a resident of Mukilteo. I'm calling in regards to, or in behalf of Lucy Yusufian about the 7520 Northeast Bothell Way property in the TOD moratorium. Thank you for taking my comments today. Hopefully you were able to read my comments delivered both to you personally in the form of written letter and email correspondence, and you were able to review those. In addition to those statements, I'd like to ask that you please help me better understand where the idea of the ability to step in and halt a sale in progress that was fully underway and reassess the vision of the TOD came from at this time, or how the thought process came about of a daycare, a social service site, a work release center, perhaps an animal shelter or temporary lodging somehow would enrich the environment of Kenmore better than the much needed affordable family townhomes, again, that were well underway. The time to ponder the city's vision of panacea as it relates to the TOD was before the property was under contract, as it is currently, before having hundreds of thousands of dollars spent and exchanged in the planning process. after being assured multiple times that townhomes were certainly permitted as a use, the same as it remains today, according to the most recent rendering of uses. I'm not sure how you're being misled into thinking potentially this is an aristocracy or an oligarchy. I'm here to inform you that it is neither. We entered into the purchase and sale agreement to sell our property for a published, permitted use. And we will continue to defend our ability to do so. We're seeking equal treatment that you have recently provided to those property owners immediately surrounding us. We see your priority of senior living, low income, affordable housing, community centers. Perhaps there's a synergy between King County and Kenmore for these efforts and purchasing the property should you decide to block our efforts. Thank you for your time, and I hope you consider the damage you will cause our family should the blocking of this sale continue. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dame. Mayor Baker, I see no further hands raised at this time.
Is there anybody else wishing to speak? Nobody's coming forward. I will move on to the next item in the agenda. And that's the consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved. Councilmember Kugler.
Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, those in favor of approving the consent agendas, please say aye.
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 Opposed? Consent agenda stands approved unanimously. Next item on the agenda is a public hearing. Ordinance number 21-0533, which established a 6-month moratorium for development within the transit-oriented development district overlay area. Do we have a staff person on this?
Yes, Mayor, this is Debbie Bent.
Yes, Ms. Bent.
Thank you. So tonight is the public hearing to receive public testimony regarding the moratorium for development within the Transit-Oriented Development District Overlay, or the TOD. On August 16th, Council adopted a public emergency ordinance that established an immediate effective date for a 6-month moratorium on the application, intake, review, issuance of any development or permit or approval within the TOD overlay area. This ordinance also established a public hearing date for this evening to receive public testimony and to consider adopting further findings. The ordinance that was adopted on August 16th included 3 development permit exemptions. 1 for complete applications for building permits submitted to the city prior to the adoption of the ordinance. 2 for complete applications for site plans submitted to the city prior to the adoption of the ordinance. 3 for any other development permits submitted and deemed complete by the city prior to the adoption of this ordinance. The city has determined that an additional exception needs to be added in regard to recent legislation adopted by the state legislature, which prohibits cities from enacting moratoria that would prevent the construction of permanent supportive housing, transitional housing, indoor emergency shelters, and indoor emergency housing. So the revised ordinance in front of you this evening, Ordinance 210535, includes that additional exception. So that concludes the staff presentation for this evening prior to the public hearing. Thank you.
Do we have any questions from council? Hearing none, I declare the public hearing open for motion for the ordinance 21-0535, amending ordinance number 21-05-33, which established a 6-month moratorium. Anybody wishing to be heard?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Thank you. I'm sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to clarify
The
Yes,
public
please.
hearing is for ordinance 210533,
Yes.
the original moratorium ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So will the clerk please call the first person?
Mayor Baker, I see no hands raised at this time.
Anybody wishing to be heard speaking about ordinance number 21-0533?
Thank you, Mayor Baker. I see that Stacy V has raised her hand.
Great.
Stacy V.
I would like, yes, Stacy V. Kenmore. I would like clarification on this, as it seems that the Planning Commission was attempting and helped the people for the other project on 175th Street get their pre-application in before any moratorium or changes to the 2015 planning projects was made on that area, or any changes for the future. Yet this person has their application already in, and after the fact, there is a moratorium that's being put on this project. Can you please help with the explanation of how that's come to be?
This actually is a hearing for you to state your concerns, and not where it's a two-way dialogue and exchange of information.
Okay, well,
So
that is
this
a huge
your
concern, that the priority was given for the other property that Kenmore wants to move forward on, that they helped a pre-application process go in for the project on 175th Street before the changes were going through the system for the 2015 permit process and allowable use. But this project, they had put in their application and their permit prior, and Kenmore is stopping that project when we're told that they cannot stop the project that was in a pre-application process. It doesn't make sense. And I don't think it's fair, and things need to be fair to both companies and both sites. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Valenzuela.
Mayor Baker, I see no additional hands.
Anybody else wishing to be heard? Anybody else wishing to be heard on ordinance number 21-0533? Anybody else wishing to be heard? Seeing no one coming forward, I declare the public hearing closed on ordinance number 210533. Next item on the agenda, in the business agenda, is ordinance number 21-0535, amending ordinance 210533, which established a 6-month moratorium for development within the transit-oriented development district overlay. All right. I think Mrs. Bent has already delivered us staff's appraisal of this. And any questions or discussions, Deputy Mayor?
So I just want to seek some clarification here. The moratorium that was passed, the moratorium that's being proposed, would not stop something that was already permitted or already in the permit pipeline. Is that correct?
That is true. It would have to be considered a complete application or a vested application for it to continue moving forward.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Yes, Councilmember Kugler.
I think most of the council received emails from the property owner. I think perhaps the person who spoke tonight and also the real estate agent who sold the property. And I don't know the specific address right now in front of me. But I am concerned about the development concerns. I feel like the property owner tried to meet the needs of, of what the city wanted and intended. But I feel like there may be a mismatch between what the market demand is, what is capable of being built on that land, and what the city is hoping to see in that area. I wonder if staff might be able to speak to this a little bit.
So the moratorium is put in place to give the Planning Commission time to review the TOD area and come forward to the council with a recommendation for new regulations. That was the purpose of the moratoria. So the Planning Commission are currently in that process. And we are hoping to bring forward regulations of council consideration after the Planning Commission has come up with a recommendation next year.
Does that answer your question, Councilmember Kugler?
And so are we talking about in a year, or do you mean next year, like sometime in early 2022? Or do we have any ETA of when we would have that determination?
I would hope, we are hoping to bring that forward to the council in April would be the soonest. Again, it depends on if the Planning Commission finish their review process and have their process finished before they can bring forward a recommendation. But currently the timing we are hoping would be April of 2022.
All right, any other questions? Hearing none, the chair would entertain a motion to adopt ordinance 21 0535, ordinance number 21-0535, which would give us a 6-month moratorium. Is there a motion?
Mr. Mayor, may I
Yes,
also clarify? So
Please.
just to distinguish, you actually, there's 2 different ordinances. You've already adopted an ordinance imposing a 6-month moratorium.
Right.
The ordinance in front of the council now, as part of this business agenda, is to amend the already existing moratorium to add protections required by 2020 legislation. So to be consistent with state mandates, the ordinance 210535 slightly revises your exceptions that are already in place.
Right. So is there a motion to adopt ordinance number 21-0535?
So moved, Councilmember File.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, will the clerk please take the roll?
Deputy Mayor Herbig,
Yes.
Councilmember O'Kane,
Yes.
Councilmember Marshall,
Yes.
Councilmember Shrubnik,
Yes.
Mayor Baker,
Yes.
Councilmember File,
Yes.
Councilmember Kugler.
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
All right, next item on the agenda is the legislative redistricting update presented by Shelley Helder from Gordon Thomas Honeywell. And this is for discussion.
Mayor Baker, we're going to take a second here to make sure that if they're waiting on a promotion, we'll move them closer to the council dais. So stand by.
Your Honor, while we're waiting, I can just give a little bit of background. As a result of the census, changes in population can cause changes in district boundaries. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, hear you fine.
And so there's been a redistricting commission that was appointed to come up with some proposed state legislative maps. And those maps came out last week. And so we asked Shelley to come on and give us a presentation about what that looked like and how we might be able to respond and participate. And there she is. There's GTHGA. That would be Shelley Helder, I presume.
Unless there's been a sleight of hand.
Shelley, can you hear us? Mayor Baker, if it's okay with you and this is an appropriate time, perhaps a 5-minute recess is in order?
Sure. Let's take a 5-minute recess.
Hi, Shelley. Is that you? Hello?
Hello.
Hi, Shelley. Is that
Can you see me?
We can't see you. We can just hear you.
Okay. Can I turn on my video? Is that an option, or is it,
Yes.
do I not need my video on?
You don't need your video on, but I've promoted you to the dais. Hold on. So you should be able to turn your video on if you need to. And let me ask.
I clicked.
Let's see. Turn to. Okay. So it looks like you're with us at the council dais. You should be able to turn your video on. If you can't turn your video on, we're going to roll with what we have. I've got your presentation queued up here, so I'll share my screen when you're ready. But right now, the council has 2 more minutes left on their recess. They took a quick break. Can you hear me?
Shelley? We still have problems with Shelley?
We do, and we're trying to troubleshoot. Oh, see, there she is. Shelley, we can see you. Can you hear us?
Hey, I can see you, and hopefully you can hear me.
We can hear you. I got to tell you, that
Great.
picture you sent with them babies was really, those are 2 really cute girls.
Thank you. Thank you. They're fun. They're a lot of work, but they're fun.
Yes, they're adorable.
Are we still on a quick break?
We are for a couple of minutes. We're about ready to come back. Please don't touch your camera. Don't touch anything. We want to hear you.
Okay. I just wasn't sure if I should start or not, but I will wait till you give me the green light.
Yeah, you'll see some more people come online here. I
Okay.
think the deputy mayor is close by. I'm not sure where others are. But we can chat. You getting ready for session, are you?
We are, yeah. I did I miss Debbie's presentation, or because I thought we were just on public. I'm just really confused how all of a sudden.
Debbie, she had her deal. We voted on new ordinance to restrict development for extended.
Wow.
Yes, you.
That was fast. You guys were lickety split. I was expecting that to take a little bit longer.
No, those babies took longer.
But yes, to answer your question, we're getting ready for session, and we're just we're waiting like everyone else to find out if there's going to be an in-person component.
Yeah, that's going to be interesting.
Yeah.
We should be back. I know we're missing a couple, but let's go ahead and get started. We got Councilmember Marshall. We got Councilmember File. We've got everybody. Yep, we've got everybody. So please, Shelley.
Okay. Well, redistricting. Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Council. Good to see many of you. So for purposes of introduction, I'm Shelley Helder. I am the city's government affairs consultant. And this evening, I'm going to be giving you a quick update on the redistricting process. And I think thank you, Anastasia. So I have a presentation here in your council packet. There's also a memo that goes over a lot of this information in even greater detail, so that resource is available to you. But I guess if you can go to the next slide, there's a little bit of information here that's going to sound like maybe a little bit repetitive for many of you, but I think it's important to just do a quick refresher on this information before we dive into some more of the details. So first, the redistricting process happens every 10 years, and it follows the federal census. In Washington, our redistricting commission is, there are 4 commissioners that are appointed by the caucus leadership. So that's House Republican, House Democrat, Senate Republican, Senate Democrat. And then the 5th commissioner is chosen by the 4 that have been appointed. The process is guided by state law, and in law, the districting plan has a handful of requirements. And so the plan is what the commissioners are legally obligated to adhere to. The districts that the commissioners draw must contain population proportionality. They must coincide with the boundaries of local political divisions and then areas recognized as communities of interest. I'll get back to that communities of interest phrase in a moment. They must be convenient, contiguous, and compact. And they must encourage electoral competition and not favor or discriminate any political party or group as they're drawing their maps. Next slide. So the process, the point of the process that we're at right now is we have proposed maps available to us, and they have been drawn in accordance with the most recent US Census data, which indicated that for Washington's population, Each legislative district should contain roughly 157,000 citizens. So each of the 4 commissioners released their legislative proposals on September 21st. Prior to those maps being released, the city did send a letter to the Redistricting Commission, specifically requesting that the city remain in the 46th legislative district. And we cited a few reasons for why we felt that was important. But ultimately, in these proposed maps, the city is not in the 46th district in any of the 4 maps. And I'm going to go through each of them one by one. So the first map we have from Commissioner April Sims. She is the appointee from the House Democrat Caucus. And Commissioner Sims' map prioritizes fair and effective representation. It's important to her to maintain and create communities of interest. She wanted to respect tribal sovereignty and then engage communities that have been historically underrepresented. So her map or her proposal creates 9 majority person of color districts. The current map that we're existing in today has 2 person of color districts. Commissioner Sims' map incorporates the requests that were received by the commission from tribal councils, and it unites cities that were previously divided. It puts City of Kenmore in the 32nd legislative district, along with the cities of Lake Forest Park, Shoreline, Briar, Mount Lake Terrace, and portions of Seattle. Very, very small portion of Seattle. So the couple things to point out about this map: the city would remain in a district with Lake Forest Park, which we noted as important and was important from the council's perspective for purposes of collaborating on State Route 522 challenges. It does draw the line between the 46th and the 32nd district at 145th Street, which would divide the western segment of State Route 522 between 3 legislative districts. And I only point that out because in the letter to the Redistricting Commission, we, as a city, noted that we wanted to remain with other communities along 522. From my perspective, one of the challenges and one of the downsides to the city for this map is that the city would be in a district with 6 other cities. And that can sometimes be challenging.
Shelley, can you hear us? Seems like Shelley is having some technical difficulties. Let's see if she'll come back online.
If these issues persist, maybe she'd like to call in.
That's a good option.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you, Shelley.
Yeah.
Shelley, for the remainder of the presentation, it sounds like we're having some technical difficulty. I suggest turning your video off, and if we continue to have buffering issues, perhaps we can have you call in.
Okay, let me turn my video off.
Okay, and I think we missed the last 30 seconds of what you were saying.
Okay, I will go back and hopefully will not repeat myself too much. So Commissioner Sims' map creates 9 majority person of color districts. The current map that we're operating in today has 2 person of color districts. And then it incorporates requests from tribal councils and unifies cities that were previously divided between 2 different legislative districts. It places the city in the 32nd legislative district, along with the cities of Lake Forest Park, Shoreline, Briar, Mount Lake Terrace, and then a very small portion of Seattle. Couple things to note about this map in particular is the city remains in a district with Lake Forest Park, which was noted as a priority when the letter that was sent to the Redistricting Commission, particularly because the cities have been coordinating for issues along State Route 522. And then this map draws the boundary line between the 32nd and the 46th district at 145th Street. And I just point that out because that then becomes a dividing line on State Route 522. A challenge to this map for the city of Kenmore is that the city would be in a district with 6 other cities. And it can be a little difficult for legislative delegation to dedicate substantial time to individual city issues when they have 6 different cities in their district. Moving on to the next map, it is the proposal from Commissioner Paul Graves. He's the appointee from the House Republican Caucus. Commissioner Graves' map focuses on communities of interest, and he notes in his summary that it's specifically not drawn to favor either party or incumbents. His map increases the overall number of competitive districts, and depending on how you measure competitive districts, it could be a little bit different, but the way he measures it is those that are kept within 3% of 50-50 based on the 2020 election numbers. And the number of competitive districts is increased from 6, which we have currently, to 11 in his proposal. His map creates 8 majority person of color districts and prioritizes keeping cities in the same district. It puts Kenmore in the 48th legislative district, along with the cities of Lake Forest Park, Kirkland, and portions of Seattle. This map also divides State Route 522 into 3 different legislative districts. And I think significant to point out with this map compared to the prior is that the city of Kenmore is in a district with the fewest number of other municipalities compared to the other 3 proposals from the other commissioners. So this is the map that puts us in a district with the fewest number of other municipalities. The next map is from Commissioner Brady Walkinshaw, and he is the appointee from the Senate Democratic leadership. His map focused on keeping communities of interest united. His map creates 8 majority minority districts. It honors requests from tribal councils, and it minimizes the split of cities. He notes that when he does have to split cities, the boundaries align with neighborhoods and school district boundaries or other large transportation corridors. Commissioner Walkinshaw's map puts Kenmore in the 32nd legislative district, along with the cities of Lake Forest Park, Shoreline, Mount Lake Terrace, and portions of Edmonds. And then this map puts Kenmore in a district with the 2nd fewest number of other cities. The 4th map is from Commissioner Joe Fain, who is the appointee from the Senate Republican leadership. His map focuses, reflects the paramount duty of Washington State, which is public education. So public education and public schools in his proposal are the greatest community of interest. And so his map uses the existing school district boundaries and protects nearly 3/4 of school districts in Washington from being split between multiple legislative districts. And really his goal in doing this is to give a greater voice to students and educators and parents within the state government process. So his map expands the number of competitive districts to 15. It honors tribal council's requests. And interestingly, it keeps 73% of residents in their current legislative district. And then this map creates 7 majority minority districts. This puts the city of Kenmore in the 1st legislative district, along with the cities of Mount Lake Terrace, Briar, portions of Linwood, and Bothell. This is the only map that draws a district boundary between Kenmore and Lake Forest Park. And under this proposal, the western leg of State Route 522, so between 405 and I-5, would be split into 4 legislative districts. And I point that out. It could be a reason for a challenge for coordination along improvements to the state route. It could also be a potential benefit because having multiple districts would mean multiple delegations and more legislators that may prioritize investment along the state route. Next slide. So that's a little bit of the specifics on each of the maps. I wanted to talk a little bit about next steps and then open it up to discussion in terms of how or if the council should weigh in this next process. So the Redistricting Commission is holding 2 statewide public outreach meetings. They're being held virtually. One on October 5th, that's from 7 to 10 p.m. The other on October 9th from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. The purpose of the meetings is to hear from the public what they like, what they don't like about each of the proposals. And from there, the commission will need to agree on a final map no later than November 15th. And as I mentioned before, there are 5 commissioners, only 4 of them, only the 4 appointed by the caucus leadership are voting members. So 3 of the 4 must agree to a final map, meaning that the map has to have bipartisan support. So I think a couple of my thoughts on the proposal, and then I would love to hear if there's any questions or comments. As I mentioned previously, the city weighed in with the Redistricting Commission and requested that we remain in the 46th legislative district. I think given that the city is not in the 46th district in any of the proposals, I don't know that that request makes sense moving forward. I don't know that it's a compelling argument. I think if the city would like to weigh in, we would need to come to some type of agreement on which of the proposals or what components of each of the proposals that we like, and then tie those reasons that we like them to statutory obligations of the commission. So for example, cities that weighed in and had their requests granted by the commission were those requests that aligned with the statutory obligations. A city that said, we have been previously divided between 2 legislative districts. We are a community of interest. We would like to be united in a single district in the future. That was something the commission prioritized. So I think there's a little bit of, discussion that we should have amongst the council to determine, do these maps adequately represent the communities of interest within Kenmore? Do some maps represent that better than others? And if not, which components of the maps do we think are valuable and that we should weigh in on? So I guess my recommendation for the council is, to have just some discussion. What do we like? What do we not like? And are there reasons that we can tie to the statutory obligations of the commission in order to make a compelling argument for or against any of the proposals? I will stop there. I apologize that you can't see me, but I am happy to answer any questions as best I can.
Councilmember Shrubnik.
I just have one initial question, but probably others will come up. So are one of the criteria, it sounded like municipal boundaries, but are there like other governmental boundaries, for example, fire districts? It sounds like they're taking into account school districts. So I was curious about fire districts.
Yeah, so within the statute, it references local political subdivisions. So I think cities are one of the primary local political subdivisions that they are trying to honor. They also made a big effort to honor tribal boundaries. And then, as you noted, school districts were prioritized in this as well. So the statute again references local political subdivisions. It also mentions communities of interest. And so there's been quite a bit of argument that there are communities of interest that span city boundaries or span certain areas. And so the districts should be drawn in such a way to represent those communities of interest.
Councilmember File.
Thank you. When looking at these maps, it does not make a whole lot of sense to go with Sim's map. Looking at that extension all the way out to Linwood, the issues are very different. When I'm looking at these maps, I actually favor the Graves or the Brody maps. And the reason why is that we have more in common with the services and the pathways and the relationships. So, for example, the 48th has Lake Forest Park, Kirkland, Kenmore, Seattle, a little bit of Seattle. The 32nd has Shoreline, Lake Forest Park, Kenmore, Mount Lake Terrace. It makes logical sense and reason. I do wish we could have stayed in the 46 to have that line come all the way down. But when looking at these different options of the 48th and the 32nd, the Graves and the Brody map, it's more logical for our community and the delivery of services. So I favor those two over the FAIN map, for example. The FAIN map doesn't make a whole lot of logical sense or reason to reach as far as the first district, for example.
Any other questions? Yes, Councilmember Marshall.
Just a quick comment, unless I was mistaken, the one commissioner who was going to honor school district lines, I saw that in that map, the entire North Shore School District was not in one district. It was cut off Woodinville, which is part of NSD, North Shore School District, our school district in Kenmore.
Yeah, that is an interesting item to note. There were, I think, I forget what percentage he said maintained school district boundaries, but the North Shore School District is not one of those. It's a good thing to note.
Yes, Councilmember Shubnik.
Yeah, I don't know if we want to take a position, but I have to concur with Councilmember File that I feel like we're between the fire district and our focus on transit that is going along 522 and up to 145th, that our orientation is toward the west. And so one of those two makes, I agree. I think one of those two makes the most sense. Yeah.
Any other comments? Questions? Yes, Councilmember Kugler.
Shelley, I don't know if you know how much of the maps will change from this point forward. Will they change substantially or not very much?
That's a good question. So it's kind of hard to say, but my gut says they probably won't change substantially, which is why I don't think it makes much sense for the city to continue asking to remain in the 46th. But I guess it kind of depends on what the substantial change would be and what the logic and the request would be behind the substantial change. And I guess the hesitation for saying that there probably won't be much substantial change is because they will need to get to an agreement in a relatively short period of time. So they're most likely going to be working with something that they already have.
Councilmember O'Kane.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I agree with one of the maps
that leans more west. And just for our consideration, if we are thinking about leaning one way or the other, I look at Commissioner Graves' map with the 48th district, if I'm reading my phone right. And what I do see as a benefit there is a couple of our major corridors are included, 522 as well as Juanita Drive. In addition, we're talking about the pool. And we're looking at, we consider Totem Lake area and other work with the city of Kirkland. So of all of them, I mean, as much as I'm disappointed not to see the 46 listed, I see a lot of sensibility with a district that has large shoreline representation. So Lake City, Kenmore, Kirkland all have a lot there. And I think those are important connectors for our connection, for looking at this. And our relationship with Kirkland is incredibly important. So as I look at all of these, and it was hard for me to decide what I liked, but I do think there's a lot of sense to 48. We maintain a lot of our 46 district boundary, as well as gain the benefit of more shoreline with Kirkland. So I just wanted to share that perspective.
Councilmember File.
No, thank you.
Okay. Yes, Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of any of these maps, but and I'm really not a fan of Graves' map as far as the state goes, but I actually do like what Councilmember O'Kane was saying about the district kind of going around the top of the lake. There's a lot, we have a lot of similarities and a lot of mutual needs and things that we work on together with folks right around that crescent. So I actually see some benefit to that. Plus, I would rather, I think from just a purely political standpoint, we stand a better chance of getting things done if we're only if the only other people in the district with us is Lake Forest Park and Kirkland, rather than Lake Forest Park, Shoreline, Linwood, Edmonds, whatever. I really worry that we get lost in the shuffle completely especially if we get tied in with Shoreline. That's nothing against Shoreline, but Shoreline is a bigger city and has, unlike Seattle, which we have been part of a district for 10 years now, Shoreline actually uses their delegation to get things. Seattle doesn't, which is why we've been able to get things in Kenmore, which is great. I worry that, especially if we're in a district with Shoreline, I do worry about our ability to get projects going forward.
Any other comments, questions? Yes, Councilmember File.
Only other option, and it's a rare option to be had and let alone practice in Washington state, is an argument to stay in the 46 and add a representative. That has been done elsewhere in our state to add a representative, for example, increase the delegation, but it's not very common. It would would have to be a lot of cities who would propose such a recommendation. Just putting that out there.
Any other comments?
I'm sorry, I don't understand the comment from Councilmember File.
Sure. So there has been an occasion in our state where a district was larger in size and population, and they had an additional legislative delegate, for example, as part of their delegation to serve the community. So it's a rare thing to happen in a state, but it has, and it's an option. I don't think that it's an option that would be likable in the way that it'd be probable, but I do stick with what my statement of the the Graves or Brody maps. I think it's our similarities are just better served.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with the situation that you're referencing. The Washington State Constitution says that we have to have one senator and 2 representatives from each district. So perhaps it's an example from another state where their constitution is set up differently. But I do think that a lot of the comments that I've been hearing from council members about the advantages and disadvantages of the various maps make sense, given the issues that you all have been working on and are prioritizing as a council.
Yes.
All right. Any further comments or questions? Hearing none. Thank you very much, Shelley.
Councilmember Kugler had her hand raised.
I got 2 now. Councilmember Kugler and then Councilmember Marshall.
Thank you. So I just want to understand our next steps for Shelley. Will you be taking our feedback and then sharing that feedback with the commissioners? Or what are the next steps?
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, because I guess that's a question in my mind. Would the city like to weigh in with the commission? If so, there are different ways of doing that. Someone could testify at the upcoming public outreach meetings, the 2 that I mentioned, or the city could submit a letter outlining the reasons that we do and don't like certain proposed maps. If the latter, I'm happy to draft that letter on the city's behalf. I would just need direction from you all to do so.
All right. Councilmember Kugler.
I mean, I think I would like for Shelley to write the letter summarizing some of the points that we brought up here. I agree with all of the points that Councilmember O'Kane made and prefer the Graves maps. And I wonder if we might also point out things that we don't want to see happen.
So yes, I'm not hearing anybody disagreeing with that, Deputy Mayor, but I've got Councilmember Marshall first.
I was just trying to draw attention to Councilmember Kugler. I don't have a comment. Thanks.
Okay. Deputy Mayor.
I just wanted to clarify that as much as I may like the Graves map for our district, his overall map for the state, I think, is deeply problematic. And I would be very careful with saying that we support Graves's map. Because his overall push to make as many competitive seats as possible, I frankly think from looking at it would, it's an attempt to make the legislature not representative of the populace at large. I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, Councilmember File and Councilmember Shrubnik.
So I would just point out the things we liked from the couple maps. I do hear Deputy Mayor Herwig's thoughts and perspectives, but that comes down to voters, who represents us and how strongly the area votes, right? But that's a different discussion. So I think we have to really think about our services, our pathways, and our relationships, and how our future of Kenmore and our priorities will likely work out. And I would say we could rule out a couple at least.
All right, so do we want to give Shelley direction to write a letter? I'm only seeing 2 heads nod here. Okay. So Shelley, are you clear?
Yes, thank you. Very clear.
Right. So yes, go ahead and draft that and let us see a copy, I think, before it gets sent out.
Of course. Yep.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Shelley. Have a great rest of your evening.
Thank you. You as well.
Give those babies a hug. All right. Next item on the agenda, 2021 Road Standards Adoption Ordinance number 21-0531. Mr. Vincente, our city engineer.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. I'm going to share my screen for my presentation. Boom. Okay. All right, everybody can see that?
Yep.
Super. So I'll be talking to you tonight about the 2021 road standards. In the interest in the hour, it is 9:30. I will try and make this as quick and brief or as succinct as possible. It's a little long, so I will do my best. So first, why are we updating the road standards? We've been working off the first edition since it was approved at the end of 2015. Since then, we've had several changes in design and construction standards, and so we want to get the standards to be updated to reflect that. Also made some adjustments to align better with council goals and objectives. I've also added some flexibility and reduced the complexity of the road standards to make it easier for our developers and for our city projects. Consistency with other standards and our code. And then I also added some information to reduce our reliance on the King County standards. So the changes from the 2016 road standards, I've got a list of 11 things here that generally I'm going to go over during my presentation. I won't bother to read those, but you'll be getting a highlight of each one of those as we go through the presentation. So future changes. I clarified the changes that can be made to the standards. Right now, 2016 just says minor changes can be done, and anything else has to be approved by council. So I've defined minor changes. It's now defined as typos, grammatical errors, reconciling any errors with our references, like say our KMC if I've got a chapter wrong or something like that. I've included the ability to update our companion documents. So if NACTO decides they want to change the name of their standards and make some changes to what they have, I have the ability to update that to reflect those changes that occur. I'm also indicating that we can make revisions to the documents in the appendices. So those are more of the technical stuff, the nitty gritty of how we're supposed to do things, and those need to be updated as needed to adjust for safety, to adjust for changes in requirements, that sort. Frontage requirements. Currently, single-family residents are exempt from making frontage requirements if a home is built within 1 year of the demolition, and they do not have to do frontage requirements. What I've done is I've limited that ability to only local roads. So if they have a home on an arterial, they'll still have to do frontage requirements. I've also provided a discretionary exemption for CIP projects so that they don't have to go through a formal variance process. The fee in lieu, currently fee in lieu, the developers have the option to make the request. I've added some information that allows the city to require a fee in lieu should we find that a sidewalk just doesn't fit for the area that the development's at. I've also added a requirement that if work is done adjacent to a CIP that was completed within 2 years, they'll need to do a fee in lieu. And then I also added the option for fee in lieu for overlay should we have a development occur next to a roadway where the pavement's in really good condition and they're not really going to disturb the pavement. Private roads. Made some changes to private roads. Currently, private roads are only allowed if you've got 4 residential units or less. And so I've expanded that to any road that's less than 500 feet. I'm not limiting it to the amount of homes built, but the actual length of the roadway. I've added a allowance for townhomes less than 50 units to be private. Any multifamily development, condos, apartments, those would be private. And then any commercial industrial building development would be a private access road. Sidewalks on private roads are now being reduced if you have more than 10 units or something greater than 200 feet, then sidewalks are required. Anything less than that, they're not required. Private roads up against streets are now going to be a driveway approach. We had we didn't really specify how those to be done, so we've had a hodgepodge of either driveway or to build it like an intersection. So I'm specifying that it needs to be a driveway. And then I've added some language in there so that if there is a private road built, future properties that might want to tie into that will be able to do that. Right now, there's nothing in our standards that say that a developer has to allow an adjacent property owner to connect to their private road if the adjacent side were developed. So I've added that language in there to require that, so we don't have a whole bunch of little access roads hitting our roadways. They all consolidate onto one. Roadway design. Sidewalks are all now widened to be 6 feet. The specifications range from 4 to 6, depending on where you're at. And so I just made it consistently 6 feet. I standardized the roadway widths. Local roads, I did widen to 6 feet to account for added utility work for North Shore Utility District likes to put their water meters at the property lines, and we want to get those out of our sidewalks. So I added a 1.5 feet on either side to account for their meters. Parking is now allowed on both sides of local roads. The way we've had it written before was it was allowed on one side, and so I'm making it possible to have it on both sides. Added clarification for townhome developments. The standards were silent on townhomes, and there are some specific types of design standards that need to be provided for townhomes, and that also is in alignment with our KMC within our development section. I'm allowing rolled curb on private roads. That provides better options for developers, allows them to have a bit more flexibility with their designs. We've also simplified the design requirements, made it a lot easier for developers to understand what they need to do, took out a lot of the complexity, and reduced a 2-table design requirement down to 1 table. And then I've added, currently our public projects like parks or anything that's a utility district, they did not have any kind of fit classification within the standards. And so I'm classifying them to be the same as industrial commercial, so they'll follow those requirements. Access and circulation. I've restricted when depressed driveways may be used. The current standards allowed either a standard driveway or a depressed driveway, and so I'm limiting where they can actually use the depressed driveways. Private single-family residents are allowed to have secondary driveways. The current standards say you can have a second one if you've got a frontage greater than 75 feet. I'm upping it to 100 feet, and I'm also clarifying where the frontages need to occur, the driveways need to occur. The standards were kind of silent on houses that had a front and a back frontage, and so I'm adding some clarification as to when they have to have, where they have to put their driveways. I've added a requirement for site distance for those driveways. The standards were also silent on what to do with site distance regarding driveways and how those vehicles interact with the sidewalk and with bike lanes. What this means here is that we would be restricting where on-street parking could occur to provide that site distance requirement. We've also added in that single-family resident front doors need to access off the highest classification road. That the standards right now don't provide any guidance on that, so we're pushing them to have their front doors on the high classification road. That does not mean driveways need to be there. We're actually saying driveways should be on the lower classification. So if they're building a home that has a road behind them, their driveway should be on that lower classification road. Traffic calming. Added the following to the traffic calming section. So we added pinch points. And we clarified what the current standards allow pinch points, and I'm defining what those pinch points are, which is street parking, curb extensions, pavement markings. Added roundabouts, expanded the language on the our RFBs, and also provided more information on mid-block crossings. Also added the option for any other innovative designs. And then I also incorporated the traffic speed mitigation policy, and that's the policy that gives us guidance on how we should decide where traffic calming goes and what we should do to get them installed. Pedestrian and bicycle. Limiting marked crosswalks to signals, hybrid beacons, and flashing beacons. The current standards were far more expansive in where crosswalks would go, and so limiting to where those could be. Adding in a lighting requirement for all marked crosswalks. There was nothing in the standards, and so now we're putting in that they have to follow lighting requirements. Minimum sidewalk clearance, I've upped it to 6 feet. The current standards were 4 feet, and that's not adequate enough for, it creates problems for the future in regards to ADA accessibility. If we should have anything happen to the sidewalk, then we don't have any wiggle room, so we would wind up having to make fixes. I've expanded the requirements for side slopes. The current standards only mention a side slope that is a 2-to-1. And so I've expanded on what's required for slide slopes up to as steep as 4-to-1. So 4 horizontal, 1 foot vertical, depending on how you build that will require some sort of mitigation. I've expanded on the ADA information within the standards, so I've been more clear as to what the city requires regarding ADA accessibility. The MUTCD is adding a recommendation that bike lanes have a 2-foot buffer with their new addition that's coming out, I believe, next year. So I've incorporated those bike buffer lanes into our standards, as well as green paint, specifically for crossing intersections and also for the approach to intersections. And I will say that the green paint is still sort of experimental, trying to figure out the best way to apply it. It seems to work well with thermoplastic, but I'm having issues with paint. So I'll be further looking into how we can better make that green paint last longer. Landscaping in other areas. We've added an approved shrub and ground cover list. Actually, our standards were pretty silent on landscaping that could occur in the right of way, and so I provided what we would accept in the right of way. I also had the tree list updated. It was from 2004, and so we had that updated. And that tree list includes drought tolerant species, and we've actually identified on the list which species those are. Added language that mailboxes, new developments will have to consolidate their mailboxes into locked units, and that the contract or the developers need to try and work with existing property owners to see if they want to also be incorporated into those locked units. I'm also putting in specification or information that the mailboxes need to be maintained by the property owners. The roadway cross sections didn't make too many changes on the cross sections. I added some missing areas within some of the sections. We didn't have the full corridors accounted for, so I added that. I updated some of the standards to match our existing conditions. For example, Juanita, we've got 10 half-foot sidewalks in the original standards, I believe at 11 feet. So I'm making those all conform. Added bike buffers to the standards. On 61st, I removed the two-way left turn lane south of 190th to provide room for a stream buffer. I also added the stream buffer on 80th Avenue between 193rd and 198th. And I did some lane width reductions down to 10 feet with the exception of Simons and Juanita. 10.5 feet is minimum preferable for buses. And then Northeast 181st cross section used to have bike lanes going from 65th to 61st. And I've replaced that with on-street parking to be consistent with what we have in downtown, given that's it's classified for businesses. Standard details, the original of the 2016 standards had 5 details, and I've expanded to 47. And trying to end our reliance on the King County standards in general gives us more flexibility, they're easier to modify, and a lot more consistency and predictability for the developers. And it makes it easier for our project managers when they need to put together a development package, project package. Additional references, these were added to the appendix. So the road classification map, I updated it to match the official classifications that are listed with the state. And then I also added our listed truck routes. Standard plan notes. These are requirements the contractors need to follow during construction. It has listed environmental protections and other things for safety for the public. Adding these in here so that we're consistent for all of our projects and our developments. So the addendum to the King County Surface Water Design Manual, that has been, that's always been out there and approved as part of when we adopted the manual. And I just incorporated into the road standards so that it's easier to find. Same thing with the traffic impact analysis guidelines. That's also a separate document that is sitting out there, and I've decided to just add that to the road standards as well. Since this agenda bill and the road standards were provided to you for review, I believe last week, I did have to make some additional changes to the standards. It seems to be never ending. So one of the things I had to make a change is driveway widths for single family residents. I increased to 12 feet. This was at the request of the fire department. 12 feet is a lot easier for them to access properties, especially if the driveways are larger than 45 feet. So they would prefer the 12, so I upped that to 12. Within 505 parking, I added a requirement that if they're going to be marked parking stalls, they need to comply with ADA design standards. There is a specific requirement that if you mark your on-street parking, you have to provide ADA stalls. So I added that. And then 6.12 traffic calming, I added in a sentence that the city's most recent traffic speed management policy shall be followed prior to the installation of any traffic calming device. And then 707 pedestrian treatments, I added design standards for pedestrian signal push buttons and also for refuge islands. I didn't have that in there, and so I needed to add something. Notifications, the revised road standards required me to do a SEPA. And so of course I submitted that. We did a 30-day public notice. There were no comments received. I also had to notify the Department of Commerce per the RCW. And then I also notified all of the utilities of the changes that were being made. Did not receive any comments from anybody for your information. So I will leave this open for discussion. I will stop sharing so that the mayor may see hands.
Yes, Councilmember Shrubnik.
Thank you. I have three questions. One is, well, I'll do the first two first, which are little. One is what I thought I heard you say is that when there's a house that is on, or a residence that's on both a more minor and a more major, that the front door needs to be on the more major road, but the parking on the minor, and I have a hard time thinking about how that would work. I mean, visually, that doesn't read well when you try to figure out where you're supposed to go in. Most people like to have, I mean, just walking around, I can't even quite visualize having, I don't think people would want that. That doesn't make a lot of sense. I'm not sure how that would work. And then the other, another comment would be the 10.5, reducing it from 10.5 width. And you said that that's more for buses. I mean, if we want on our arterials to ever have transit, I think we should build for that. I think that's what we're trying to strive for. In terms of the traffic calming, I'm wondering if you can just point us to that document, because I have, as we've discussed, just want to make sure that the process that we've agreed to is kind of laid out in that, and I don't know where to find that.
Okay. I need to look at the traffic calming policy. That might be on our webpage, but I need to look. So I'll get back to you on that. Regarding the house access front door on the major, driveway on the minor, this is, to give you an example, you know, a lot of the properties, several of the properties on Simon's Road, or the developments, the glass house on 192nd, where you've got all of the backyards facing the arterial, but there you got the big fence, and then nobody ever maintains the front yard. And then we start getting lots and lots of complaints about nobody's maintaining. And so there's a lot of effort that we have to do to get people to maintain that. Whereas if we can get people to put their front yards on those arterials, then we feel that they will be more likely to maintain those. And the driveway in the back, it would be, they'd still have the front. The driveway in the back would be really only for those properties where there is a road behind them. It doesn't happen that often. It's happened more in the past, but we're seeing less and less of that occurring. So I'm trying to prevent any more of those situations from occurring. In terms of people not being able to find it, I don't know. I mean, it's with GPS and Google and everything else. I think people may not have much of a hard time finding stuff anymore. So I tossed my Thompson guide, so I don't think most people are using maps anymore. So I'm not.
Yeah, that wasn't, maybe I maybe used the wrong word, but just sort of how a residence reads from the street is confusing if you have the entrance, if you have two entrances. Basically you're suggesting two entrances. One is a major street entrance and one is a minor street entrance, and that I think is confusing.
Yeah, it would be a major street entrance for the front door with the driveway, garage in the backyard is what it would be.
Yeah, I made my point.
Sure.
Councilmember File.
Thank you. So I'm going to just kind of go down a little list, if you don't mind, and I'll take them one at a time. I really appreciate your update to the tree and shrubs, but I really want to see, for our public transparency, a website landing page on our Kenmore website to help guide our community along so they can partner with us in this effort. It makes it a little easier to find than to have to dig around through the code pages. And you see that mirror matched in other surrounding cities, for example, Kirkland, Edmonds, just to name a couple. When you were discussing the routes on our community routes, I want to make sure we're going to continue to publish the snow routes and which are the priority routes, as well as safe walking routes for our community. I think that's important public transparency in our walkways to include that just for ADA issues as well, and roadway design. So when you're talking about roadway design and the elimination of, private roadways and dropping the sidewalk requirement, we really need to have our sidewalks in our, suburban community to connect our safe walkable routes to our local schools in our downtown corridor to, transportation. To eliminate this puts people on the road, puts children on the road, and less safe places for pedestrians and bicyclists to utilize the road, even if it's what you will now zone as a private way. And when you're talking about lane widths, I concur with Councilmember Deborah Shrevenick on the importance of keeping enough width for our transportation and our future transportation. We certainly don't want to spend millions of dollars to enhance and beautify our community only to have to spend millions more to expand again. But I do appreciate the buffers. I would like to see more buffer design implementation, similar to Kirkland for community neighborhoods, whether we have a small setback, so it's not exactly right on the edge of the road, to have a little bit of a buffer of 8 feet, along with your shrubway, walkway, and sidewalks helps to keep that beauty and that charm that neighborhoods are so desired for. So those are my concerns. Thank you.
Councilmember Marshall.
Yes, I just want to advocate for native plants. And can you tell us offhand, were there any native plants that made the approved list on either shrubs or trees, or hopefully some substantial number of them?
So I'm not an expert in planting. The listing was provided to me by Jennifer Gordon, and so I'm pretty confident that these are either native or very well-suited plants for the right-of-way. So, but I can follow up with you if you'd like from her as to whether or not they're all native or what are.
Deputy Mayor.
Couple of quick questions. One, we know that lane widths do help slow folks down and make our streets safer. I saw that you were increasing lane widths on or at least the standard lane width on arterials from 10 to 10.5 feet. Can you talk a little bit about why you made that change?
So I made those changes on Juanita, primarily because Metro has requested that we at least do 10.5. They can do 10 feet, but it's a little bit nerve-wracking for the bus drivers, so they would prefer 10.5. And Simon's, I believe they're pretty much 10.5, so I just left them at 10.5. I didn't see the point in reducing them down based on the fact that they're already 10.5. So, and a lot of the other ones, there were some reductions made because to get the width we want, we would have to then remove the existing curbing. So some of that was to fit in with the existing infrastructure.
And in the notes, when you're talking about changes, it mentioned removing parking on arterials. Is that just for major arterials or also the minor arterials?
So that is all arterials, major and minor, along with our collectors. The only road that so far is calling out to have parking is 181st in the final configuration. It's hard for me to remember what I did for 175th, if I did that as well. I'm looking right now. I don't have a cross section. So I don't have a cross section for 175th. So just 181st is the only arterial that has parking on it right now.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember File.
Thank you, Mayor. I just forgot to lower my hand.
So you were talking about sidewalks on arterials when there was construction of some sort happening, but nothing required on non-arterials. So aren't we leaving ourselves wide open for more sidewalk gaps? Because a lot of times on the residential streets, there's a development that goes in or something, they've got a sidewalk. And now we've got some major remodeling going on, but they don't have to have a sidewalk. So, I mean, it seems to me, if they're doing anything substantial, there ought to be a sidewalk.
So I really am not familiar with the history as to why this exemption was given. My understanding is it was to reduce the burden on the single family homeowner who was just going to replace their existing home, that they're not your typical developer that's subdividing and building 4 or 5 homes and making a profit. This was more to encourage Kenmore residents to stay in Kenmore, to take, if they have a small house, to make a larger house, or to build in a better home, say their home is needs to be replaced. That to me seems like it would be a good reason to not put too much of a burden, because if you're just replacing your home, the cost of putting in a sidewalk in front of your house could be upwards to a couple $100,000. And that could almost be prohibitive for someone to replace their home if they wanted to, or to upgrade it. Say they had a 2-bedroom home and they start a family and they want to make it a 4-bedroom home. Well, it would be prohibitive for them to do that if we were to require them to put sidewalks in front of their, on both sides. Again, it's just on the local road that the requirement would be, the exemption would be given. They would still have to do it on the arterial.
Yeah, well, we've seen that what happens there at 72nd Street and 170th, where they said, okay, let's put the sidewalk on residential street and heck with the sidewalk on the arterial. We'll live with weeds, because weeds are more attractive than a sidewalk.
Well, and you've got two different situations with that particular development. They had to redo the sidewalk on the residential side because they damaged it and were tearing it out, portions of it, because there were 1 or 2 driveways there that they had to replace and put in new sidewalk, and then they did a cut at a different location. So we pretty much required them to replace that sidewalk because of all the work that they were doing on that side. Otherwise, they wouldn't have had to do anything if they would have kept the driveway where it was.
Yeah, well, there's something that's got to be done with some of our regulations, because we're not doing much to make an attractive city. We're actually making it less attractive by some of the things that are going on. The other thing is on the planting strips and vegetation. Where's maintenance coming from?
So for the majority of our roadways, the adjacent property owner needs to maintain the right-of-way in front of their property. We send out notices. We're actually going to send out a reminder to folks on all of our arterials that they need to maintain. The big exception for arterials is 522. Jennifer's group's taking care of that. And 68th, where the bridge is going to be, the city will have to take care of a lot of that, because we're the property owner on some of it, and some of it's in the median. We don't want property owners climbing out to the median to take care of that. And then I believe Juanita, we might be doing that for a while, because we're putting in an irrigation system, and we'll own that irrigation system. So we would be the ones maintaining. But overall, it's the private property owners that are adjacent to the amenity strip that they would be the ones having to do all that work, all that maintenance.
And they're aware of that, right?
I'm going to say yes, they're aware of it. We've sent out several notices it's on our website. We've sent out newsletters. We've sent actual letters to folks. We're going to send another reminder in either this upcoming newsletter or the one in January, I think. Can't remember which one they're going to get that into. And then for those folks that still aren't aware, if we see a situation, we're made aware of it, then my right-of-way inspector sends them a courtesy letter saying that, hey, you're responsible. Here's our flyer. Just a reminder that you need to take care of that. So. And
you've driven 170th recently, right? 170th and Simons Road.
I have walked 170th and Simons Road recently in the last few.
You know that nobody is receiving notices. They're responsible.
Oh, they're receiving notices, because we get people calling us asking us, why do I have to do this? Can I get out of this? I can't get out there with my lawnmower. I have to drag it all the way across the house, the sidewalk down, across in front. So people are getting them. It's a question of whether or not people are doing the maintenance or just ignoring it.
We need to do something with regulations so that people can't ignore it. Councilmember Shrubnik.
Yeah, I'd have to concur, and I don't think I understand that 1.5 years ago we made that decision. I believe that we did that. I don't really remember doing it, but I understand that we did that. I don't think it's working. So we may want to, I would actually suggest that we revisit that decision. And maybe think about taking that back under city control. We're not going to do that tonight, but I would suggest that we at least have that discussion because it's not working really anywhere in our city. I think asking an existing property owner that's maybe been there for 20 years and all of a sudden now there's a sidewalk and amenities strip in front of them that they've never had to maintain. And I think that's unrealistic. And I think the other piece that isn't being maintained is when we have the traffic calming in the center of the streets. That also is unclear who's maintaining that, if anyone. So yeah, so I just think that whole piece needs to be thought about again.
Councilmember File.
Thank you. So I do concur with Councilmember Shrevenick here on what she mentioned tonight. And also our mayor, you know, when it comes to our sidewalks and our planning of our community, there's no reason to keep bad code on our books. Sometimes it's better to do away with it and throw it out and really work towards our city goals of a safe, walkable, connected community connecting to our downtown. You know, it doesn't make sense to continue this. Let me gather my words so I don't say something nondescript, but it doesn't make sense to have sidewalk and then at an absence of sidewalk, it does not flow with a safe, walkable, affirming a community. When we're talking about pedestrian safety and ADA issues, it's just time to move on. I really do think we need to address that. Maybe it's not here tonight, but we should. I certainly don't want to keep that in this set of recommendations to adopt tonight. I'd rather put that piece back and send it back. And the easement situation and the maintenance. Don't we own the easements where the planting strips are at and the shrubbery is at?
So yes, it is city right of way and
Okay.
it is publicly owned. I do want to clarify that the road standards do not govern who maintains the right of way, nor does it have any enforcement power in terms of getting people out there to do it. That's the code. Title 12 in our code establishes who maintains and what happens if you don't maintain. And that is a section that I do need to revise, and I'm slowly working on it. But eventually it will come before you to discuss. So that now probably is a good time to bring it up. But yeah, again, the maintenance of the right of way is separate from the road standards. The road standards do not address maintenance and they don't have any bearing on maintenance.
Thank you. I think this falls into the same situation as lighting, for example, because ownership is, defined by law as you have 9/10 of the law because you own it, so you're responsible for it. I think we're going to come back with a situation just like we did with lighting and the responsibility of the city. Passing that off to our neighbors isn't really fair or equitable to our community, in my opinion, and to some of our community members, especially our elderly. So we also heard from one of our community members tonight about the situation on 68th near the church where that large residential multi-developmental housing community is going in. And this odd side road. That side road connecting that community does not have a good, healthy plan for a walkable pathway that's safe. And I believe that's part of our goals, is to continue to have a safe, walkable community. It doesn't make sense to go backwards. So how did that happen?
So it is safe. What was reviewed and approved is safe. There is sidewalk continuously from the development all the way to the new sidewalk that's going to be built on 68. That roadway itself is about 80 feet from 68th. It is not that close to where the students catch the bus. So there's plenty of room there. I would not call it unsafe at all. It is safe. It is meets our standards. It's full width sidewalk. It's got curb returns, crosswalks at 68th. It is, like I said, it's about 80 feet from the intersection. So the students that congregate for the bus are not going to be near this particular location. They will be at 68th, and actually they're just around the corner. So the buses picks them up on 68th itself. So they're not being picked up on.
Right. I do understand that there's going to be sidewalks on 68th, but the roadway that connects to this multi-housing development isn't it without sidewalks and then connecting to the street, or is it going to have sidewalks? And we're not talking about directly off of 68th, but that is it 191st and the side entrance there?
So
that's going to be the main entrance.
So the development itself is going to have sidewalks within the development all the way to 192nd Street, and then they're going to continue and connect to the sidewalks that are being built on 68th. And then they're also going to be required to build sidewalk on the other side of the street so that the road is better defined in that location.
Thank you for that clarification. It's much appreciated.
Any other questions? Not seeing any, the chair would entertain a motion to adopt ordinance number 21-0531 for the 2021 road standards, an amendment to chapter 12.50 of the Kenmore Municipal Code.
So moved. To adopt the motion proposed.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none, will the clerk please take the roll?
Councilmember Shrubnik. Councilmember Shrubnik.
Yeah, I'm going to have to vote it no. I think a number of us made recommendations that haven't been addressed.
Councilmember O'Kane.
Yes.
Councilmember Marshall.
Did you hear me?
No.
Oh, okay. The answer is no.
Councilmember File.
No.
Councilmember Kugler.
No.
Deputy Mayor Herbig.
Yes.
Mayor Baker.
No.
The motion fails.
All right. Next item on the agenda, renter eviction moratorium, presented by the Community Development Director, Mrs. Bent.
Thank you, Mayor. At a recent council meeting, council passed a motion requesting staff bring back legislation to extend the temporary moratorium on residential tenant evictions made necessary due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The city's temporary moratorium on residential tenant evictions was established in March 2020 and is scheduled to expire on September 30th. So council adoption of ordinance 21-0536 would extend the temporary moratorium and the residential tenant protections from September 30th through December 31st of this year, through ratification of a proclamation and issuance of emergency rule. If the ordinance is adopted, it would go into immediate effect. Thank you.
Any questions, any comments? Councilmember File.
Thank you. I really appreciate this being brought back. It's really important to our community, given the rise of COVID and increase in breakthrough cases in Delta, as well as unemployment is no longer being covered for many families and individuals within our community. We really have to slow the roll on homelessness. There is a program and funding for small landlords through the Washington State Department of Commerce for individuals who make under 80% of the mean. The portal application is pretty simple for people to apply to, so hopefully we could link that. But before I move on much more, I certainly do not want to have to come back for a special meeting at the very end of the year, and I'd rather amend this ordinance and proclamation to January 15th. That way, it will roll us over through the beginning of the year. It's similar to what other surrounding cities are already doing. And I think our staff and our co-counsel would appreciate that.
So, Councilmember File, is there a motion there?
Yes, I'd like to amend the recommended moratorium and ordinance to extend to the date till January 15th and the 2022 to help get us through that start of the year, so we do not have to come back for a special meeting or emergency meeting, December 31st or the week of.
Second.
All right, so let's just be clear about this. You want to change the end date on the moratorium from December 31st, 2021 to January 15th, 2022.
That is correct, Mr. Mayor.
Great. So,
Mr. Mayor, if I may, just to clarify again, I apologize, it's late and I hate to interrupt, but
sure.
The motion I heard was to amend the end date, but implied, I just want to clarify, is the motion also to adopt the ordinance with the change that the moratorium be extended through January 15th of 2022?
That is correct.
We certainly could do that, or we could just make an amendment. But let's go ahead and adopt the motion with the changed end date. So that's what I'm hearing.
Yes.
All right. So any further discussion on this? Councilmember Marshall.
Yeah, I do have increasing concern as we continue it, not only for potential litigation, maybe that not so much, but for concern about what the effect might be on smaller landlords. And the fact that we are giving out money from the city of Kenmore, and we have state funds that are being loosed for people's aid. But on the other hand, we don't have anything from the Landlords Association weighing in on this, saying that there are awful things happening. My understanding is that banks are still giving forbearances to landlords and property owners. So I think I can still be in support of this, but I'm very uneasy about continuing it and taking away the power of eviction, indefinitely. Thanks.
All right, anybody else? So there's an motion in front of us to, 1 second, let me get to it. So I'm reading the right thing.
Mayor Baker, would you like me to read the motion on hand? Motion
Pardon?
to adopt ordinance 21-0536
Right.
ratification and adoption of proclamation and issuance of emergency rule 20-03.7 with the amended date set to January 15th, 2022 instead of December 31st, 2021.
Yes, correct. Is there any further discussion on that? Hearing none. The clerk, please take the roll.
Deputy Mayor Herbig.
Yes.
Councilmember Shrubnik.
Yes, but we didn't get a second.
Oh, I seconded.
Oh, you did? Okay, sorry.
Councilmember Shrubnik, yes.
Mhm.
Councilmember Kugler.
Yes.
Mayor Baker.
Yes.
Councilmember File.
Yes.
Councilmember O'Kane.
Yes.
Councilmember Marshall.
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
Wonderful. Next item on the agenda is staff report. Mr. City Manager.
Nothing, Your Honor. Thank you.
Councilmember reports and comments. Let's start with Councilmember O'Kane.
I just have a brief thing to bring up, and I want to thank our deputy mayor for calling attention to the fact that our legislative redistricting is our district is a part of the whole, and that it's important that we give consideration beyond our immediate needs. I really appreciated that, and it's so important to our democracy that we have fair, balanced redistricting. So I just want to thank you for that.
Councilmember Marshall.
Thanks for the public who is still attending, and for the public who may watch this, hopefully will watch this at some future point. I wanted to really emphasize and draw your attention to the importance of attending and making your voice heard at the Planning Commission, not this next Tuesday, but Tuesday, October the 5th at 7 o'clock. The Planning Commission is going to be taking up the issue of changing the single-family residential zone to allow potentially, I believe, row houses, duplexes, and cottage housing. The stated goal is to provide options for housing and greater density. This is an extremely complex issue with the potential to fundamentally change Kenmore and many important considerations, including echoes of what we heard tonight, whether we're going to have infrastructure such as sidewalks to provide basic public safety to keep up with such expected or anticipated development, and how we can do that. Issues as to our tree canopy, the majority of which is located in the single family residential zone, and whether we want to keep mainly trees prevalent in Kenmore. Many important issues, so I just want to urge the public to attend the Planning Commission meeting, and please keep up with the issue and stay involved. Make your voice heard. Thanks.
Councilmember Kugler.
I just have a couple of comments and updates. One is that I know this month is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and I know there have been a lot of coverage in the news lately about related homicides, and King County actually has the highest number of fatalities due to domestic violence since 1997. And it sort of surprised me to see that that comes up as frequently as it does in our city through the reports that our chief provides to us. So I just wanted to share one fact that 92% of domestic violence victims reach out to family and friends first. That's a significant number. I asked our city manager if we could make sure that we have a resource on our website under our social services links. So he and the chief are adding the Washington Coalition Against Domestic Violence information on our website, so people can refer to that for help or direct their friends to that. And then I also wanted to encourage the public to participate in our climate action plan events and survey. If they didn't get the flyer in the mail, you could go to our website and get more information. There's also the Fire Commission open house tomorrow night if you want to lend your voice to that, ask questions, and stay up to date on what is happening with that. That's it. Thank you.
Councilmember Srebnick.
Thank you. Yeah, I want to echo Councilmember Kugler, encouraging the public to participate in the climate action survey that's out. That's awesome. And as a function of that work, when we get to it, I know I've emailed you all about potentially signing on to the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act. I think that might be the best place to discuss that is when we're discussing the climate action work more broadly. That's it.
All right. Councilmember File.
Thank you. I want to echo the sentiments regarding domestic violence made here tonight. As a survivor of domestic violence, when there's opportunity to leave, most can, not all can do so safely. We have great partners and stakeholders within our community that we've often partnered with the city of Kenmore. I hope that we can contribute some of that funding, our funding to these groups as we've seen such a rise in domestic violence. And we do know that children exposed to domestic violence in their youth often repeat what they've seen later in life. So the more we can do now to educate our public and make change would help ensure future generations successful strides in development. And just, this is always a triggering issue for me. So it's hard to discuss. I don't talk about it often, but it is hard. So it's a painful experience for many domestic violence survivors, but they're survivors, and it takes a long time to recover from that kind of pain. And just to pivot, we had in the past discussed council continuing education. It was past mentioned, so I don't need to ask for a continued meeting on this, but there is a pathway for ensuring that public transparency, as Councilmember O'Kane and Srebnick had asked for in the past. And the best way to do that is by forwarding the continuing education our co-counsel do to the Association of Washington Cities for participation in the CML program. That's normally not forwarded from our city clerk. It usually has to be done individually, but it's also to the benefit of our co-counsel to participate in the CML program and to have that public transparency for community, to be able to serve on any AWC or NW or NCL committees and constituency groups. You do have to have your CML credits, and you do have to have your certification. Otherwise, your application goes to the bottom of the pile. So we have an amazing council, a very talented co-counsel, and I'd like to see every one of you shine this way and also connect to our transparency. So if there needs to be discussion around that, I'm interested in hearing your thoughts or concerns. I'm assuming with the silence that there's a non-interest or.
Yeah, Councilmember Kugler.
I'm a little unclear on the ask. Are you basically asking everyone on the council to seek their continuing education credits through like AW Association of Washington Cities or other?
What would probably make it most simple is just to have our city clerk forward the continuing ed training we already had to the AWC for the CML program. the city keeps a running list of that. It's not a difficult thing to do. And I do encourage our co-counsel to participate in the program. And I would hope to see some of our co-counsel have greater interest or possible better opportunity to serve on state and national committees. Should they get their CML certification.
Yeah, Councilmember Marshall?
I say it sounds interesting to me, but it's beyond my capacity because I don't know what it is specifically tonight. I'd like to look into it later, so I can't consider it tonight, but it's appreciated.
Mm-hmm. Very good.
No, I'm a little confused by the term co-counsel, but that's okay. Usually refers to lawyers the way I'm familiar with it, but.
And fellow council members.
Okay.
But before we move on, it's been clear our city manager has several significant schedule differences over the next couple of weeks. We're going to have another couple weeks without one-on-ones. I'd really like to see if we can at least have one-on-one scheduled with the assistant city manager in a couple weeks so that we're not going through another week or two without being able to tap in on issues that are going to come before us.
Mr. City Manager, I saw your camera go on. Do you want to add anything?
I mean, I talk to my colleagues, other city managers, and they usually meet with their council members about once a month. So I meet with you guys more than once a month. So I don't have any issues this week, and I'm out of town next week.
Deputy Mayor?
And council members are always able to reach out to staff about upcoming agenda items and ask questions, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. And just the last thing I would like to tap on to is regarding the surveys that are going out to our public. We heard concern and concern in the past over how some of the questions are presented. One of the simplest things to do when developing questions for surveys is to run them through a smog test. And most of our city individuals know, our city staff know what that is if they've had some sort of public administrative background. But it would help serve our community better to run the smog test and clarify the questions for clarity. But that's my last input. So thank you very much.
Deputy Mayor.
Nothing to add.
Major changes happening on Saturday. Please. City's got a link, I believe, up on their website. A number of bus routes are changing. 522 will no longer go downtown. It's stopping at Roosevelt Station starting Saturday. 2 new bus routes, 320 and 322. That'll be going to Capitol Hill and South Lake Union. Just lots of changes. So please look out for it, because if you use public transportation at all, you're going to be affected. There is an opening ceremony on Friday night at Northgate Light Rail Station, and Saturday morning, first thing, light rail's running from Angel Lake to Northgate. So 3 new stops are being added: University, Roosevelt, and Northgate. So changes are coming. And I don't have anything else. So there's nothing to come before us. Next meeting's October 11th, 18th, and 25th. But the 18th is a study session. So with that, Thank you, everybody. We're adjourned.
Good night.
Night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.